That hurt.
Then what is this thing?
Gio should never play for U.S. men's national team again because of the action of his parents.
What an idiot! Oh! What type of Muppet does this?
It's Muppets. Absolute Muppets.
I'm not going to be the best person to give a whole explanation here, but that's...
Booty! Sick! Booty!
Fucking deal with it. What are we really doing?
Yeah, I can agree with that. A zebra in between a tarantula and an elephant.
Has been nothing more than a sham.
Yeah, we didn't play well, but you know what? At the end of the day, we got the job done.
It's going to be a good time for sure.
Oh, sex with the first cousin would indeed be incest. And
all right, welcome to the Straight Red Card, Jimmy.
Where am I? What is that intro? That is wild.
I was trying to gauge your reactions every time something would pop up.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
I was like, cool.
Yeah. I mean, we put a new one out every 3 months or so.
As you
but
should. You got to keep
yeah.
that fresh.
It's a lot of fun. But we had to make sure that one guy was called an idiot for sure about the whole reign of circumstance. But I want to welcome Jimmy Trash Can Conrad to the show. Do you still go by that on the new show? Still doing Trash
I
Can?
don't. We are in the process of finding new nicknames, I suppose. But
where did cream cheese come from, by the way?
Cream cheese was a commercial on our podcast in Soccer We Trust that they ran in between our bits, and it was like a show on and the main character was like an esports series, and the main character's name was Cream Cheese. So Charlie thought it'd be funny to call me Cream Cheese. And yeah, Trash Can, I was actually doing one of the shows outside of Old Trafford one time.
Saw it.
And I was put it on a trash can, and people just didn't give a shit that I was doing something, which fair enough, but the bin was full. It wasn't like it had plenty it didn't have a lot of space. But it was cool. It was a cool experience, and for whatever reason, the Wi-Fi outside of Old Trafford was perfect. So
I watched it when it first came out. I just died laughing because you're taping yourself. People just throwing garbage straight.
It was insane.
Oh, I'm sorry. Whew.
No, it's great. It's a lifetime memory now. So I'm glad that it happened.
So you're now the host, of course, of what is call it what you want. That's
I love that.
He's got to work that into the.
I do. I am going to work that in. That's good.
It reminds me of Steve Ralston, who was, I think, one of your old teammates on the U.S. men's national team, because he looks so much like MCA. He really does.
He does. He does. Yeah, there's some similarities there.
It's kind of scary. So how are you doing with the whole idea of you being a host of the show? I mean, you really are more of a host than I think the other version of it, by the way, where you had a lot more time to talk.
Sure. I think that it's okay. It's a role that I enjoy because I get to, in some ways, ask the questions that I think the listener wants to know, especially from Jesse. We get to see a lot of Charlie Davies on Morning Footy and other Kicking It and all these other areas. And you probably get to hear from me in different ways too, but we don't really get to hear from Jesse. So it's just teeing him up to really lean into his experience and to get his thoughts on, and I try to tiptoe into like, well, how do you really feel about the U.S. men's national team? It's just to kind of get into his raw emotion, because at the end of the day, he's a fan just like we are, right? And he wants to see the national team do well, and he's got his own ideas about how to make that work. Obviously, he's a little bit closer to that possibility than the rest of us, but it is nice to pick his brain, and I don't know if we give him enough of a hard time. I think we could probably bust his balls a little bit more, but we got to ease into it, right?
Right. I was going to say, when it was initially announced that he was going to join the show, I was like, man, he's vying for a coaching spot with the U.S. men's national team. I hope he doesn't go on there and say something that hurts that pisses off.
No, for sure. I mean, actually, he's been great. We were a little bit nervous at first because how much was he going to reveal?
Right.
Given that he does have these other opportunities. And I think what you see is, and he hasn't said this to me, but there's other coaches that Roberto Martinez does, Paramount Plus or the Champions League stuff prior to, Belgium or any other jobs that he has. You see a bunch of other coaches hop on and give their thoughts, and it doesn't really take away from their opportunities. If anything, it just kind of enhances it and gives them more visibility. Hey, like, actually, we're hiring somebody with personality. That's great. We want people with personality. So I don't think he's said anything that's gotten him into hot water. Though there's plenty of time.
No, not yet, but working on it. By the way, I want to mention, because
Derek, real quick.
Yeah.
Is that your TV I'm hearing?
Oh shit! It is. My bad. It is now muted.
Derek, you got a real life aquatic vibe going on. I have plenty of time for that.
I want to bring up the fact, Jimmy, you are probably only the second person that's been on the show 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
But also, the first time you were on was back in 2011. Is that crazy?
That is crazy.
13 years ago. You know what? Look at us now. Look at what we used to look like. We used to look like that.
I've aged better. That's all I got to say.
This is us, Big Soccer days, when we hosted the podcast on Big Soccer. Now look at us.
That's amazing.
Oh, it's creepy, isn't it?
Well, no, it's what soccer does to you in this country. It just ages you. I mean, all my buddies that coach now, they age like 10 years in 6 months. I feel bad for them.
It's like being president of the United States. And by the way, you are the 7th U.S. men's national team player that have been on this
all right.
podcast.
I've got multiple caps. So it's,
you do,
you guys, yes,
3 caps. I'm
like the Steve Martin of SNL here, leading the charge with multiple appearances.
I thought last week that Max Bretos had been on 3 times. He has not, and he is not a U.S. men's national team player. So out with that.
Eat it, Max. Yeah,
eat it, Max. By the way, do you miss Heath, and have you apologized to him yet?
Oh, Heath and I have been longtime friends. Listen, I've got nothing to apologize for. If I have a chance to bust his balls, I will take that chance every single time. I've seen him since. We've talked a lot. And, obviously, we all wish things would have worked out in a better way. But, we keep moving forward, and that includes Heath as well. So he's going to turn this situation into something positive. And he's already getting more opportunities with Apple TV. And so I'm excited to see where he goes. But yeah, he's super talented, and it was awesome to have had that much time to work together. Because if we look back at our history, we played together in the U.S. We always had good chemistry and always had a good laugh as friends, and still do. And then I actually, which is kind of interesting here, is that I brought him into the Kick TV family. But ultimately, what I didn't know was that I hired him to be my replacement, because I'm the one that got sacked. And he took over my position ultimately, and in kind of a role reversal, it kind of happened with this as well. But this was apples and oranges, a little bit of a different situation. His contract was up, and so they chose not to renew it. But I would say that, and that's above my pay grade. But I would say, as to the whys and hows and whatever. But in terms of like his talent, and let me say this. I really enjoyed our time together, and I'm glad that we had a couple of years to chop it up, and hopefully we can circle back on that at some point in the future.
I'm kind of missing the Davies Heath Pierce battles. Those were awesome.
Yeah, those are fun.
By the way, I know on Kicking It, they had Jesse on, and Jesse and Davies Charlie were talking about this call they had to have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing before even Jesse came on the show. And it was related, of course, to the comments that Davies made about, well, I wouldn't want Jesse as the U.S. man. He's just another systems guy.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know anything about that phone call and how they worked that out?
Because I heard about it.
I wanted the details.
Well, I heard it in post. I heard it afterwards, after it all happened. And ultimately, Jesse wanted to make sure that him and Charlie were on the same page before Jesse would agree to be on the show. Just so he just wanted to understand where Charlie was coming from. And at times, whether it's a podcast or I think Jesse saw it more of a social media hit, right? So you sometimes miss out on the context. And so they cleared the air. Charlie didn't back down from his sentiments, which I respect. And I also respect Jesse for accepting that that's how Charlie sees it. And yet we can all still be friends and talk about the game in a positive way. So yeah, so it all kind of smoothed out, and I think they brought that up on Kicking It to demonstrate that you can still have respect for each other even if you don't see the game in the same way.
Oh, no kidding. You can actually disagree on things and have people on your. I mean, Tact and our show had a disagreement. We brought him on. Max, we had a disagreement with Max. We brought him on the show. It's okay to disagree. It doesn't mean you hate the person. You
Sure.
know, it's just, I mean, we've gotten to that point, unfortunately, in some of the soccer culture, and it's unhealthy.
Well, that's
But
what gets clicks, right? That fuels the algorithms,
Yeah,
negativity. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I found that out earlier this year when my little spiel went nuts all over the place when I criticized the Fox
Gold Cup
broadcast.
covered.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was like 500,000, and it's like, okay, that's me going nuts, and now everybody thinks I'm a crazy person. So you gotta.
And I actively retweet that once every 2 weeks, just so it stays viral.
Yeah, you got to say it, keep it alive.
Yeah.
Got to keep it alive.
The interesting thing I want to bring up about Jesse is, while I watched all the shows, what I keep waiting for, and I think a lot of other people are, is him to say, you know what, if I got my hands on the U.S. men's national team, now he doesn't have to say that, but I'd like him to say, I'm not a systems guy. I'm not gonna Greg Berhalter. I'm not gonna Pinocchio this thing when I get in there. I'm not gonna joystick it. If I could hear that out of his mouth, and maybe you have, so that's why I'm asking. Do you think Jesse would be another joystick guy, or do you think there would be more?
That's a good question. I have really appreciated my time with him on the show that you guys can see, but also off camera as we're preparing for whatever the topic's going to be for that day, and to get some more insight on his ideas and philosophies. And I actually had a chance when he was still at Leeds to go up there and watch, and he was very kind to me. I was doing something with Man United and Ecolab, one of their brands, and so I decided to extend my trip, because why not? When I'm in California, to get all the way over the UK is quite a haul. So I was like, okay, Jesse's at Leeds. I'm just gonna give him a call or a text and see if it's cool if I come watch training. And they had just beaten Chelsea, so everything was roses at that point. And so he's like, yeah, of course, come up. And so I ended up going up, and he goes, introduces me to everybody, and I knew a few people on his staff, so that helps in not feeling as awkward as an outsider. And he goes, hey, listen, we're having a video meeting with the guys. You should hop in there. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'm 100% hopping in. And they were previewing and getting ready for their League Cup game against Barnsley at home. And it was cool. I was sitting in a row right behind Tyler Adams and Brendan Aronson and Jack Harrison, who I am friends with this time at New York City, NYCFC. And it was awesome. Got to talk to those guys a little bit, bullshit with them. Then they go out to training, and I get to watch them train. And I got to see Jesse, and I think a couple different versions, like him as the guy that's running the video meeting, to really understand the asks of what he wants from his team, and then to actually go see that be executed. And because I'm trying to get my coaching badges too. So just trying to understand how he's connecting the dots in terms of his communication and how he wants his team to play, but how you build off of what you did against Chelsea, then leading into and maintaining your focus against a different type of opponent that's probably going to drop off, make the game a little bit more difficult. So all these little nuances and subtleties of his coaching style were on full display, and I really appreciated that. And I appreciated his kindness. Was very grateful for him to kind of let me in behind the curtain. And then I got to watch them play. I got to sit in the owner's box next to Victor Orta and his wife, Kim, who's so sweet, and one of his kids. And they won that game 3-1. And I got to walk around the field, and yeah, it was great. It was an incredible experience, and I caught him at just the perfect time, because I think that was the peak ultimately of his time at Leeds, and it was really special. So to piggyback off of that and to maintain my communication with Jesse post that, and now get to talk to him in a more of like a fan type way, where, hey man, we really love this team, as I mentioned before. What's the best way that we can get out of it, or get out of this team and get into these situations and win these games, and to kind of lean back in on those experiences and get more out of him is nice. Now, in terms of being a systems guy, I think he cut his teeth in a system with Red Bull. So I think he sees the game through that lens, knowing that he's had a lot of success with it, with the Red Bulls and RB Salzburg, and got to see a different version of it with a different set of players at RB Leipzig, and took all these learnings and then tried to apply things that were actually really positive. When you look at the metrics, in fairness to him, when you look at the metrics that he had at Leeds, he surpassed anybody that they had that was already in place after him or before in terms of what they were trying to do and the opportunities they were trying to create. But hey, I mean, the game's a results-based game, and if you're not getting those results and you can feel like people aren't buying into you anymore, or I'm just speaking out of turn. I'm not speaking for him, but so yeah, it's been great. But to answer your question directly, he's got a clear vision of how the game should be played. And I think what would probably please some of the fans to know is that he understands that the national team's not a club team, and you only have so much time with the guys. And so how can you simplify that and make it as malleable as possible so you can get as much buy-in and understanding? And at times, and I'm speaking for myself, it feels like Greg Berhalter makes it more like a club team, which we can see from a culture standpoint, the guys really enjoy being around each other. So on that side, it's been a hit, I think, in terms of his approach. But tactically, it just feels like things get overcomplicated. And again, this is me taking bits and pieces of what I've learned from Jesse over the last year and a half, 2 years. He would try to simplify some of those tactics that he's seeing currently with the team. But again, I mean, who's to say, right? He inherits that team, and who's to say how he would actually approach it if the job was his?
Well, you just simply don't have as much time as you would at a club team. So,
Exactly.
you know, you're going to have to make, although, I mean, Greg doesn't, I'm sure he's made some, you know, I'm sure he said, well, I can't do this. I don't have the time to do that. But it still seems a little over. Go ahead, Brett.
I was going to say, no, he doesn't do that, because what he does, he actually sends the players homework like weeks in advance. Like, hey, watch this video, read up on this article. This is what we're going to do. So when they come into camp, they're a little more prepared. But I'm just like, I don't think he looks at it as a sense from like, oh, I don't have the time to do this. He's like, well, I'll just make sure that they do this off of my time to do it, so they're ready to go.
Yeah.
So,
Well, to be fair, I mean, you should be sending him some homework to do. I think. I don't know if you ever got.
No,
homework.
100%. 100%.
65-page PowerPoint. I understand. Rough.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is, and I'll use a recent experience. I was coaching the local high school here, which I didn't put on any social media, and didn't want. I just wanted to coach without any of that type of hoopla around it. Not that anybody would come watch our games, but
1,300 new fans is weird.
Yeah, exactly. All of a sudden, we've got like full stadium here, like just giving me a hard time.
The schools out there in their Twitter.
Yeah. My daughter was on the team, so I was playing my full Bob Bradley nepotism and really learning how that works. I love you, Bob. But I would say that it was, I used video, and I did a lot of homework with the players. And what's interesting is it took me a couple months into the season to teach these kids how to be students. Like for me, you're only going to reach your potential if you're a student of the game. You're going to hit a ceiling if you're not a student of the game. And even when I coached the San Francisco Glens, the USL League 2, where I'm around a lot of D1 athletes at local schools in the area, I would ask them, hey, did you guys see the Champions League game? What did you think about X, Y, and Z? And they're like, yeah, I don't really watch soccer. And at that moment, I'm like, that's cool. You're super talented, and this might just be the level for you. But I don't think you're going to push through that ceiling if you're not a student of the game. And so I would be doing the same thing. Whether these players look at the homework, it's almost secondary, but it does allow me as a teacher, right, as a coach and a teacher, to lay a foundation to say, hey, this is what I want from you. This is what I expect. And in this particular game, here are the 3 things that I want you to focus on both sides of the ball. And I would try to simplify it that way. At times it feels like, and again, I'm going to put air quotes around feels like, it feels like there just might be too much information coming from Greg, and a simplification of that I love the ideas and I love where his heart is at, but how you communicate that information is incredibly important, and how it's being absorbed by particular players who might absorb it in different ways is part of the challenge as a coach too, because what I might say to one player, and even though I'm saying the same exact thing to somebody else, they might be hearing different parts of what you want them to hear. And that's getting to know your player pool, of course.
Kind of interesting. Go ahead, Brent. Sorry.
Real quickly here, I was going to say, in contrast, my 8-year-old son at the time, last winter, was playing indoor soccer, and we're waiting for well, it's more futsal-ish style. There's not really futsal, but it's more futsal-like. But
gotcha.
We were waiting for the games. We're waiting for the game to end and everything like that. I'd look over to see. Usually, I would expect all the kids be, passing the ball off the wall or kicking around or just goofing around. And like 8 out of 10 of them were sitting down on couches watching EPL games. So I mean, it is kind of changing that sense where you're starting to see more of the youth watching.
Which is great. We need to have them watching on TV, going to games at any level, because what they need to see is the decision making that's being made by players that are playing their position, and then that being reinforced, hopefully by their coach. Like, hey, we've been working on this. Look how these players are executing it, or look how they're not executing it. And what was actually helpful for me is that as my players developed as students, they would go support the boys team, and I would say to them afterwards, like, hey, how did they play? I'd ask them tactical questions about what they saw and what would you have done something different. And I finally, by the end of the season, it was very heartwarming for me, was that they started to talk to me in ways that were very tactical and very. It was great. I was sad the season ended because it's a short season anyway. But we had laid some really good foundation. So it's fun. It's fun to coach, but it's funny that you could use those methodologies at even the high school level, and you're still basically trying to implement similar things at a higher level, and you're trying to meet your players where they are. Some of them will watch the homework or read the homework, and some won't. And the ones that won't, you probably already know who those ones are, not us, but the coaching staff. And how can you reach them where they are? What's that break-in point to make sure that they trust you and you trust them?
Not to go back too far in history, but Jimmy, I have to say, 13 years ago, you came on our show for the first time, and you were the first person honest enough to say, I mean, I don't know who watched on Big Soccer, as a few thousand people, but you said, listen, there's a guy on this team that isn't committed. There's a guy who's not a student, and his name's Freddie Adu. Not to pick on Freddie.
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
But you were the first one to say it out loud. And I know I got some rumbles in Big Soccer back in the day. I don't know if it escaped that particular.
I wasn't wrong, by the way.
No, you were right. You were absolutely right.
I like Freddie. He's a superhuman, but in terms of playing, he thought he had already made it. And here's the thing, and this goes for any player at any level, even the world-class players. You have to continue to strive to get better than you were the day before. And if you maintain that mentality, it's going to drive you to continue. I think, I don't know why I have Luka Modric pop in my head, but that's a guy who's closer to our age, and you can still sense he's trying to find ways to stay sharp, to stay fresh, whether he's playing or not. Can he still be a good leader? He's still trying to find that feel for the game. And once you start to settle and accept that I'm here, or I've already made it, or whatever it is, it becomes harder to regain that hunger that I admire in the top players.
So Ted Lasso, how the hell did that happen? Because I remember what happened is I was watching it. This is when it originally came out, and then I watched it and I freezed it. And I took a picture of it and I sent it to Brett. I said, "That's Jimmy fucking Conrad."
Apparently Brendan Hunt, also known as Coach Beard, is a big fan of your show. He saw me in the 2011 episode. Back in 2011. He's like, we got to get this guy on Ted Lasso.
Oh my God.
His honesty was through the charts. So, no, I would say that what happened was there's a photo, I have a Ted Lasso photo behind me that a friend got me because I really enjoyed the show. And he got me this photo. He's like, I could put it in your backdrop. I'm like, okay, cool. And I posted it on Twitter, and I said, and I tagged Brendan on it. I tagged Jason Sudeikis and a couple other people cast. And Brendan was the only one that responded. What I said was, do I frame this or do I kind of leave it unframed? And he goes, you got to frame it, of course. And once I was already following him and some of the others, he followed me back after that tweet. So I was like, oh crap. Okay. Coach Beard's he's following me. Coach Beard's following me. So what do? Like, you don't want to hop in the DMs right away, right? You got to slow play it. So I sent him a note, say, hey, Brendan, thank you so much for the follow. I take a couple days, and I really appreciate what you're doing with the show, and it's so sweet and human, and I really appreciate all the nuances that you're bringing to the game. But prior to that, I said, hey, I don't know if you know me, but I used to play for the team, and kind of just that whole intro. He's like, dude, he wrote back. He's like, dude, I was at the 2006 World Cup. I know exactly who you are. and at that point I was like, oh, cool. I could totally relax around this guy. And so, by the way, I'm like, my nickname's Conradinho, warm ballers for life. I gave him all my little, and he's like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but it's good to see you again, So we started chatting from there. And when I went over to England for this trip, at the same trip, I went Man United, a Liverpool game with Ecolab, and then I went to Leeds with Jesse, and I was going to go see some friends in London. So I texted him before the week started, I DM'd him, and I said, "Hey, Brendan, I know you guys are filming. I'm going to be in the UK for about a week. Are you guys going to be at any of these games? I'm probably going to go to Arsenal Fulham at the Emirates." And he writes me back, and he goes, "Yeah, we're going to be at Arsenal Fulham, so we'll just plan on meeting there." I said, "Great. It'd be great to see you and grab a beer or whatever." And he's like, "Perfect." So I'm at Leeds. So that's a couple days later. I'm in Leeds, and he sends me a note, and he goes, "Hey, do you think it'd be cool? Do you want to come to the set and kind of see us doing our thing?" And I was like, yeah, that would be absolutely awesome. So here's my question to you and everybody listening and watching right now. They say, "Hey, come in on Friday. Here's the address." I said, "Sweet." Like, what time would you get there? Like, so everybody's getting there. All the actors are getting there at 8:30, and they finish around 5 or 6. You don't want to show up too early, right? You can't be the first person there. You got to play it super cool.
Right.
So I had a rental car. So I control over my transportation, which is nice in London. So my question to you guys, Brett and Derek, what time would you get there? You get invited to the Ted Lasso set. It's pretty open-ended. You can show up whenever you want. What time are you getting there?
I would have got there before everybody gets there. I mean, I'm a stickler for getting to appointments on time, and if anything early.
But wouldn't that give like a vibe of like,
well, I'm going to geek out.
This guy's way too eager to meet us.
I'm going to be like, I'm sorry, Danny Rojas. My wife would kill me if I didn't get your autograph.
Right.
So yeah, I'm the same way, except for back in my partying days. I was never the first guy at the party. They're kind of different situations, I guess, in some ways. But yeah, you're right. I mean,
listen, I was super excited. So I'm like, listen, I decided on 11. I'm going to get there at 11. Apparently they had lunch around
I've got things
11:30-ish. So I was like, cool, I'll get there right before lunch. And then lunch, I can kind of BS with them before they get back into whatever they have to do in the afternoon. And there was so much traffic. I didn't get there till 1.
Oops.
Yeah. Don't get a rental car in London, by the way. The traffic's terrible. You want to take the tube, right? You want to go underground. You don't want to be above it when you're.
And then you got to drive on the other side. That's gotta be
that's a fun
weird.
challenge, though. It is, but it's kind of a fun challenge. I didn't get there till 1, and I was like, oh my god, I blew my opportunity. What an idiot! Like, who shows up this late? You know, I felt like a total asshole. But so the first person I saw and I got connected with was Chip Hamilton, who's one of the first name when the screen goes black at episodes, it'll say Chip Hamilton, at least in season 3. And Chip's great. He's become a good friend, and he was so like, they listened to the podcast, him and Brendan did, and so we sat and BS in his office until it was kind of time. And he got the call that it was all clear for me to go. And before I could go, somebody tapped me on the shoulder, and it was Coach Beard and full get up, you know. So it was pretty surreal. So I'm there, and I'm on set, and I'm watching them shoot scenes. And it was episode 10 of season 3, and I'm like, I'm in their office. I'm looking at the John Wooden pyramid. I'm like, this is so surreal, you know. And I was geeking out the whole time, though, trying to keep it cool the whole time, and got to talk with Danny Rojas, and his sister was there. So at least I had a kind of a buddy that was also, you know, not necessarily part of the cast, but hanging around. So I wasn't the only one hanging around. And ultimately, Brendan was very sweet. And he told everybody I was going to be there, and he would just team me up. So, hey, tell them about the time you played against Ronaldo. And all the guys on the team, they love these stories, right? So I tell them my Ronaldo story. And then Brendan would go shoot a scene. He'd come back like, hey, tell them about that time you played against Pirlo. And I was like, this guy's totally building me up, and I've got plenty of time for it. So what happened was, they put me in the room like where they do the press conference stuff. So I'm in the press conference room, and it's me and Sam Obasanya and Gumberbatch and Cumberbatch. Excuse me, I don't know why I went with a G. Cumberbatch, yeah, and Jan Moss. I don't know why I'm butchering all these names. I watched the show. But yeah, all these guys, they're all there. And so we're in that room, and we're not shooting in there, but they're just like story after story. And I've got them cackling. They're laughing and laughing. And so they were laughing so much that we had to get told to be quiet because they're shooting a scene. So Yeah, it was a
They're
great
back
time,
there.
and I couldn't believe what was happening. I just could not believe this whole thing, and being like that close to all the actors. And so by the end of the day, there's about an hour left, and all the guys had left, but they had to shoot one or two more things with Roy Kent. And they pull me aside. They pull me aside. And they go, "Hey, do you want to be in a scene?" And I was like, "What?
I'm fine. I'm good.
You want to be in a scene? You
Oh,
goddamn
yes.
right I want to be in a scene. What do I got to do to be in a scene? I want to be in a scene. Let's make the scene happen right now." So
You're
we
like,
end up,
I've been here since 1 o'clock. Am I going to get paid all the way back to that point?
yeah. No, I was like, I'll do whatever for free. It was great. So I ended up doing a scene, and I had to walk the scene a few times before the camera was filmed my direction. But I had Roy Kent stare me down like 5 different times, and I was like, I didn't want to look at my phone. I didn't want to feel distracted. I wanted to stay in the moment for all of it. But I just could not wait to text all my friends. Like, I cannot fucking believe what's happening right now. This is insane. Yeah. And the thing was, after the scene got shot, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, you'll get in for sure." I was like, they're going to cut that.
Yeah.
That's going to be on the editing room floor. Like, I'm not going to be in Ted Lasso. And so I didn't tell a soul. I told my wife, but I didn't tell anybody else because I just didn't want to build up the hype or get my own expectations crashing down on me, and they ended up keeping it in, and now I'm a part of this incredible series that I love and admire, and now I'm friends with those guys, and I got another Sudeikis story that's I got 2 for you. The next day we go to Arsenal Fulham, and they invite me to come with them, and that day was, the both days were super special, but they were still kind of in, when they're on camera, they're in the zone, doing all that stuff. The next day, there was none of that. So we just got to go to the game and drink some beers. So to get drunk with Coach Beard and Ted Lasso at an Arsenal game was pretty rad. I'm not going to lie. And we went across the street to keep the party going afterwards. And it's just like these lifetime memories. So recently, at New Year's, one of the things that my family likes to do, I grew up in Southern Cal, is we go to the Santa Anita racetrack and bet on the horses. Like, we get as many of our friends and family to come out just for one day. And we did it. And there was a horse that was racing called Be a Goldfish. So so I've got these guys' numbers. I text Brendan and Chip and Jason, and I said, what do you think? Should I bet on this thing? It was not a favorite. It was a long shot by a lot. And Jason's like, spot me $100. And I was like, all right, 100 to win on Be a Goldfish. It got dead last. And I texted back. I'm like, yeah, he goes, he texted me back, believe, with a question mark. It was the best. Those guys are next level. So anyway, I'm just saying this publicly because I want Jason Sudeikis to pay me my $100. He still owes me $100. Come on,
man.
Owes me $100. But yeah, those guys are great and fantastic, and they're really sweet, and all the vibes and energy that you see on the show definitely exist off of it, and that's what makes it special for sure.
Very
do you have a favorite character on the show itself? Not the person, but the character.
Roy Kent. Is easy one. Yeah. So grumpy and maintains that grumpiness pretty much throughout. But it's hard to get away from Roy Kent, I think, overall. Yeah. How about you guys?
Yeah, well, Roy Kent connects with me in every way. Yeah, I'm a grouchy old prick.
There are definitely periods. People are pointing out like Jamie Tart. Obviously, my wife's favorite character is Danny Rojas.
Football's life. Yeah.
All right.
But Jamie was an interesting character because he had such a character arc that was like, I enjoyed him like in the first season. I enjoyed him part of the second season. I wasn't a huge fan of his character arc in the third season. And some parts I enjoyed, some parts I really didn't. But
they won him over. He became like them ultimately, or that's how I saw it. That he finally started thinking about more than just himself, but him being selfish is what made him awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I like the way that all kind of worked out at the end. Jimmy, so on your show, you have a geography question.
Oh,
at the beginning of every show. So
you're going to test me? I never have to test myself. I always just challenge the other guys.
I know, but I'm going to open it up to Brett too.
Oh, man.
Between the two,
me and Brett get to be Jesse and Charlie. I like it.
Yes.
Here we go.
So let's pretend you're a center back again. All right, you're forming a wall. Okay, forming a wall. It's a free kick going on. And of course, as most center backs did, especially in the old days, I don't see it as much these days. I don't know why. But you would take your hands and you would cover the Alvin and the Chipmunks to protect
Mm.
them. Okay.
Mhm.
In this country, they would say you are covering your hoden. Hoden. What country would it be if you were covering the Alvin and the Chipmunks? And they would say that would be your hoden. Anybody got a guess?
Your Hoden sounds Dutch to me, like right off the top.
You're very
I was
close.
Flemish?
Dutch was my first one, but
You guys are close. Very close.
Belgian. It's got to be Belgian then.
In fact, this could be 3 countries that speak this language.
German.
Bang! Brett got it.
I mean, I didn't want to say German initially because that would have been my go-to for any answer for you because you're part German.
I know, half German or whatever.
German.
That's what they
I
call.
should have Lederhosen, Hoden.
Yeah,
that's what they call man marbles in Germany.
I love that.
Der Hoden. Der Hoden.
That Hoden.
All right.
Protect the Hoden.
Protect the Hoden. Also, I got one more serious question before Brett takes us on a journey here, but and that is, I did notice that there's certain things that you take a little personally, and one of them would be Camp Cupcake, and I want to frame this right because it is what gave you the opportunity that it gave you.
Sure.
But there are a lot of people out there, Herc. We can talk about Casey Keller, others saying, you know what? Its time has passed.
That's true.
Has passed.
It's
And
changed.
Do you agree with that?
I think it has evolved into more of an open tryout, I guess. I don't know. That sounds a little dismissive, but and I still think it has a ton of value. I don't want to take away from that, but I don't think you have the same type of weight. I mean, there would be camps, January camps, where you had some significant names, guys that were regulars in the starting 11 that you don't get, I think, in the January camps anymore. And that's a good thing. I mean, that just means we're evolving past that and maybe outgrowing that particular need for that camp. However, I still feel like any opportunity that bubble players, fringe players can get around the coaching staff and start to win them over, that's going to be the best environment to do it, as opposed to them watching you play with your club team and like, will that player fit? I don't know. But now when they're around you for 10 days to 2 weeks, and that's another thing. Those like January camps used to be 3 weeks long, and now they're a lot shorter for a number of reasons. And that's another sign of evolution. But I still think there's some value being around the coaching staff in that way. And it is different for sure. But
I'm sure
yeah.
it hurts a little, because, things have evolved, but, we're all kind of look back with empathy on things we experienced before. So it's kind of
Sure.
like when Landon Donovan said that Pulisic should come to the LA Galaxy, he was kind of, in a way, kind of projecting his own experience.
For sure. Yeah.
But we did get to see Esmir Baraktarovic, and I that opened our eyes to this guy, or it opened other people. So
for sure, and I think that's a good example of it. Okay, maybe before we could identify 3 or 4 or 5 players that could help us in a January camp, and now maybe it's 1.
Right.
Another thing that I liked about this particular game is that we got to give Miles Robinson the captain's armband, and you get to see whether he's up for that responsibility. He might not be, and you're going to find that out very quickly. It also helps you rule out different players that maybe aren't up to the task anymore, or if they can't perform in that January camp game, not just the game, but the lead up to it and how they're training. And you can see younger players that are just as good, if not better, then some players play themselves off the team. Right. And that's why you continue to have these camps, and you want to continue to get information. And so if you have a week or two to work through your player pool, even at that level, or start to identify a Baraktarovic who clearly has a ton of talent, then that's great. And you can get tabs on him. You can start that communication in a more meaningful way than just some random text, like good game for the New England Revolution, bro. Like you actually have more of a frame of reference, a foundation to work from. So there's still so many positives from it. I guess what pisses me off is just how casually it gets dismissed and by the fans who can't or refuse to want to see that this is a huge growth opportunity for some of these players to demonstrate that they can hang. And we might rely on 1 or 2 of those players in the future that maybe make a pivotal play for us in a big game. And we can all go back and point to the Camp Cupcake that was their little breakthrough, right? And they're all little stepping stones. That Camp Cupcake was the same for me. It was there's a stepping stone to earn the trust of the group for me to outlast some of the players I was competing against in the same kind of tier. And then can I break in from tier 4 to tier 3 and then tier 3 to tier 2 and then kind of go on. But that's how I approached it. And I was kind of do or die because I was 27 and this was going to be it for me. So my urgency was a little bit different. And obviously the camp's getting a lot younger. So it's definitely changed, but I appreciated it.
Well, that takes me to what I was going to ask next, because you mentioned how the camp's getting younger. Would you be opposed to it just being considered a U23 tournament or game instead? Camp.
Yes. I think there's some value there, and especially in a year like this year where we're qualified for the Olympics. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's what it turns into moving forward. But there are players that are going to break through that maybe are a little bit older, right? That maybe need or going to get that chance. They're the Jimmy Conrads of the group that are 27, 28, and Brian White in particular. Like you get a kid from Vancouver, all of a sudden he scores a bunch of goals. Cool. Let's see what he's about. Let's throw him in with the group with this other and see if he can cut his teeth. And if he goes out there and dominates, not only in the game, but in training, there's some consistency to the way he plays that you think could mesh with the player profile that you're looking for with the full team. Well, now you got something, and if he's got the right attitude, then you start to build from there. But it's interesting. We have more attacking players than I think we've ever had. It's incredible. And our central midfielders, we have a ton of options and a lot of different looks and different player profiles, as I mentioned. Defensively, though, I still think we're a little thin. I just saw the U23 roster come out too, and the center backs, I actually think maybe our outside back depth could be a little bit better, and our center backs maybe aren't. We don't have that lockdown. Tim Ream's just a little bit older, not playing as much for Fulham, and Mark McKenzie and Chris Richards and Cameron Carter-Vickers and Miles Robinson. They're all there, but are they owned it? Have they made it theirs just yet? I don't know. So these are good things. I mean, they're all pushing each other to be the top center backs, but even with our U23s, I was like, we're kind of thin in this area, which is a little bit of a red flag.
I know it is.
We'll go over the U23s here in just a bit, though.
I do want to apologize as Brett takes us to the next topic. Like tight shirt Twellman and Miazga kicking his dog and Landy Cakes.
In the background is going to come up in just a second. So
and Camp Cupcake. We were the early purveyors of some of those things, and so I apologize for the Camp Cupcake thing. But
that's all good.
2010. What are you going to do, right? That's just
all good.
It's just
I made the most of my Camp Cupcake. If the other players didn't, that's on them. So
right. But
it is what it is.
I'm just proud that Tight Shirt Twellman knows his nickname and that we came up with it, right? Just like the turd in the background, who is actually Michael Cameraman, because I forgot his name one time on the show. I couldn't remember him. He would usually, they've cut him out now. They don't do this on the conferences anymore. But he used to come on and say, Greg Berhalter has won 23 games in a row against CONCACAF countries. That is more than any other U.S. coach that has ever coached for the U.S. soccer team ever.
Who's this? Wait. Who are you doing? Who's your impression
That's Michael Cameraman.
Got it. I've been around. Yeah, I've been around a Cameraman for a long time.
He's a great guy. I just couldn't remember.
Your impression is not great, but I understand where you're coming from.
No, it's not a good impression. But I used to just sort of mock him because that's what he would do before each. And then I couldn't remember his name one show, and I called him the turd in the background. And people started calling him the turd in the background. And then it got back to him, and I'm not going to get into all the details, but he had a great sense of humor about it. That I will give him. All I've heard from him, from Meg Swanick to Brian Schroeder, from everybody, is that he is a fantastically nice guy. So
he's good at he part of his job is not being nice, right? He's got to protect the players and the coaching staff and the organization. So, and I think he's done his job really well, which is why he's had it for as long as he has.
I will follow the players around and make sure they don't say anything stupid. Yeah, that guy. All right. Oh, here it is. The turn.
By the way, this is the second version. Turd didn't realize that Jimmy was jumping on the show immediately. So
All right. Welcome to the straight red card. My wife says hi. Greg Berhalter is the most successful U.S. men's national team manager ever. He was the first manager to win 70% of his games with a roster under the age
It sounds
of
like
25.
he's getting introduced for a boxing fight, you know.
Yes, I know.
And
Yeah.
the
in
holder
this corner.
That's my
of the
Adam,
middleweight title belts.
that's my Adam Sandler's The Goat. I don't know if you ever heard that comedy sketch that he did about the talking goat. I'm a talking goat. I live on the back of a truck. That's kind of my thing there. Scorpion Larry for $2 says Chandler better than Zusi at right back circa 2016, 2017.
I'm biased. I was captain of the Kansas City when Zusi and Biesler were rookies, and so I have a soft spot for those guys. Timmy Chandler, I thought he had a couple good solid years to the national team, but I'll go with Zusi all day, every day. Zusi, excellent, and maybe somewhat underrated passer of the ball, and he could shoot from distance and great brain for the game. And he hasn't officially retired yet, but he's had a hell of a career.
Well, let's be honest. Chandler's not really a right back. He's a winger. Like later in his career, they're like, no, we're not going to force you to do this anymore. At Frankfurt, you can go play winger. He had much better experiences there. He really never was an effective back. He was better as a winger for Frankfurt than he was as a back. So anyhow,
that's fair.
It's my opinion. And I have my own personal connections with Chandler, and I continue to follow him even after it was clear he was well out of the picture. So my mom used to translate for Timmy Chandler in his American interviews because he was uncomfortable speaking English. My mom translated for Timmy Chandler. No shit, no joke. All right, Scorpion Leary again. Okay, it's a super chat. All right, thank you, Larry. Was Pencil next to Holden running his mouth when Sucker punched on the mean streets of England? I don't know.
I hope I get called pencil neck one day. That's a badge of honor right there. Thanks, Scorpion Larry. I have no idea. I don't even remember him getting sucker punched.
Oh no, he got punched because he had to have surgery on his orbital. I do. Right. Yeah. He was at Southampton, I think, at the time, and I don't know if he was even sucker punched. He was just punched. I don't know what happened, but it still doesn't seem like a guy who's going to start a fight.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know Stu. I know who he is, obviously. I don't know him personally by any means, but I don't think he's the type of person that would be running his mouth.
Not in a way that would instigate a fight.
Yeah.
He's funny. I'll say that. So he definitely has some lines. And if you're maybe not of the right mindset, or if you got a little defensive, I could see how that potentially could lead to a fight. But I don't know that story. I've got nothing to add to that.
Well, question. he ran his mouth recently about Brandon Vasquez, right? And then
I missed it. What did he say?
He said he should have made the squad. And then somebody's
really running his mouth, but he had an opinion that Vasquez should have been included over the likes of, say, Sargent. In
terms of speaking. And then Herc said, well, who you taking off? Who you cutting?
Oh, it's Pepe. That's right. Yeah.
And then he said, Pepe ? And that brought me back to the days when I was in school. I used to have this teacher, and if they ask a question and you answered like Pepe with a question mark, they'd be like, is that an answer or a question?
Yeah, right.
All right. So yeah, trying to get on Stu's bad side here. Jose Lopez for $5 shoots out to Jimmy.
I think it was a shout out.
Shouts out to Jimmy for inspiring kids since the Kick TV days to get into soccer. No
mommy's way. No mommy's way. Shout out to Jose. What's up, man? Thank you for the support.
Jose's awesome. He's great. He's a regular here. Thank you, Jose. We do appreciate it. So is Jose Reyes for $10. Hey, Jimmy, just want to say thank you. I played CB in college ball, and you were one of the players I looked up to. I'm
sorry about that. Can I cut that off and say I apologize?
Come on, Jimmy. You were better.
Listen,
you're better
talent,
than that.
I will say my talent, though, wasn't traditional talent, I think, as we define it. My talent was in the intangibles, communication, commitment, and a desire to get better. And those are all important. But, if you're looking at me for dribbling skills, probably not the right person.
that brings me back to that little Twitter little thing we had like a year ago, where
is this pre-viral rant that you went on, or
yes, this is even before that. Do
All right.
you even know the viral rant that we're talking about, by the way?
I did. I remember seeing it going, wow, he's passionate.
He lost his
Derek's feeling it today.
He lost his mind, yeah.
He lost his shit. But it does remind me of the time when I can't remember who the player was. He's like, yeah, Greg Berhalter used to slam his head against the lockers. And then you were like, yeah, playing with him, he was kind of a dick, I think you said that actually. I think you said, yeah, he was kind of a dick.
Sure. I'll stand by it.
Where is that guy now? I'd rather have the dick. I'd rather have some life, as you called him, vanilla the other day. Like, I'd rather
it
have
just
some.
Felt like, yeah. I think the guy's been beat down, to be honest, and to the point where he has to be very methodical about what he says and how he says it publicly, whether it's about players or whatever. I think the Gio Reyna situation really made him reflect, and potentially his superiors reflect on how they wanted to communicate their messaging. Everything he does now, so friendly, so nice. And not to say that the national team coach shouldn't have that, but it just feels a little over the top at times.
But
and not to say that he's not like that, but yeah, it would be nice to have a little bit of that edge.
I mean, but hasn't he, Jimmy, for 4 years, even before that, he seemed rather platonic, or like he's Aristotle or Socrates. It's just
Socrates.
Socrates, like Socrates. Yeah, I've never seen that side of Greg Berhalter since he stopped being a player. I haven't seen this fiery, like aggressive. It doesn't need to be aggressive, obviously.
I get it,
but
I understand what you're saying. No, I do, and I do wish that he would have a little bit more like, this is what I'm doing, and this is what I think is best for the group, and who gives a shit about anything else? I wish there was a little bit of that. Not to say that he doesn't have it behind the scenes, but it just feels like, I don't know. It's hard. Going through this own and I'm working on my A license, and you see all these things on TV, then you go live it. Whether I'm coaching USL League 2 or whether I'm coaching the high school team, I was an animal on the field and I could hit a switch, but my team doesn't necessarily need that, right? I preach being balanced emotionally. Emotion doesn't help you in the moment. More often than not, you're in your own feelings about a mistake or whatever it may be, or you're pissed at one of your teammates for not doing X, Y, or Z, and that's just going to take you away from what we need to do as a team and as a player individually. And so when my players, I would work with them about, hey, you're getting in your own way. We make a mistake on one play. It's going to, now I know that I've lost you for about 3 minutes, and a lot of things can happen in those 3 minutes in the game before you start to kind of like click back in. So how do we work through that? And so I worked on some methods that I had used when I was a player and said, hey, why don't you just try this? And just give it to me on the first play. If you make a mistake, whatever, you want to be pissed for the next 10 plays about mistakes, fine. But on this first one, try to keep it in and manage it and be fair to yourself and understand the situation, which gets back to being a student. Sometimes you make the right play, but your teammate didn't support you in the right way. So if you have a coach that understands what they're seeing, they're going to back you up 100 out of 100 times, and then we'll address the person that should have been there to support you. But if you're around a coach that doesn't see that and gets pissed at you, even though that was the right soccer decision, that's where I think we're losing some of our kids, because this is now me going into a tangent. But I think we have more than enough kids that want to play, that want to learn. And I don't know if our coaching has matched that level of sophistication in terms of the subtleties and nuances of what the right soccer decision is in different situations. And until that changes, we're not going to consistently create the player that I think we're all craving for, given the amount of numbers that we have playing this game.
That's deep. I will say this, though.
That's why I'm here.
I know.
I'm call me new Socrates.
Like, I look at the differences between Bruce, and maybe that's not fair to Greg, and Bruce just being kind of this real dude, like this, gonna just tell you how it is. And then I look at Greg and I look at African dogs and the behind the scenes, behind the crest stuff, and it just makes me like, is that a real dude? Because Bruce was real to me. Like Bruce's interviews, yeah, okay, he didn't take any shit. He didn't suffer fools.
Mhm,
That's Bruce. Bruce doesn't suffer fools. Blah blah blah.
Mhm.
But this guy, I can't relate to him, and I look at the inspirational stuff in Behind the Crest, which is supposed to be the best stuff, right, Jimmy? That's the best stuff they put out. And I'm looking at African Dogs. I'm thinking there's something wrong there. That's not natural. That doesn't seem natural. And I look at the players, kind of look at themselves like, what's this all about? We went to the zoo, and that's what you came away with. What the hell?
Yeah, I'm not much in for the gimmicky type stuff. I know that Jurgen Klinsmann prior was bringing in people that could roll up a frying pan or could tear a phone book in half, and which is one of my favorite, like, Behind the Crest of all time. Just because the players' reactions afterwards, like, what the hell?
What was that?
Hell was that? And why? And why was it? Yeah. With you, I mean, I guess on paper that might sound like a good idea, but it was absolutely ridiculous. But for me, one of the all-time great things that ever happened to US Soccer was that whole sequence of events. For me, gimmicks, I don't think, if you have to motivate somebody when they're at the national team level, you probably don't have the right guy. That's what I would say. That's not a player that you can probably lean on consistently. And if they can't value that, and that's why I thought it was interesting this past weekend with Haji Wright and in particular Brendan Aronson, who both got initially probably in their minds like, what else do I have to do? Well, Brendan Aronson has had a poor season, but overall, but Haji Wright's been excellent. Like, what else if I'm a Haji Wright, what else do I have to do to get, like, I've got 15 goals in all comps. Like, I don't even know, like, what else am I supposed to do here? Brendan, obviously, but he gets left off and he has that response, right? Like, that's what you want to see. Great response, like hungry, like a FU, the more that we can have guys that, and I don't think that Brendan's a player that took it for granted, but when you kind of get called in consistently, you lose a little bit of that feel of what it's like to be on the outside of it. And when that door is shut, holy shit, you got to figure out a way to kick that door back open. And in some ways, I wish that Gio Reyna would have had the door shut on him. And this is where I'm pretty bummed that Greg Berhalter's still in charge, because if we had had a different coach, there would have been no emotional baggage there. You're just like, Gio, you're not playing, so I'm not going to call you in. It's pretty simple. There's other guys that are playing and playing well at a high level. Malik Tillman in particular, probably get your minutes in these two games against Jamaica and whoever they take on in the next one. And that's who we're going with. So I'm just going to leave you there. You fight for your spot, and, we'll keep talking for the Copa America. Greg can't do that. There's too much baggage. If he had left him, it just turned into this whole thing that this cookie cutter version of Greg that you see behind the crest and on every other interview with a big smile. It's like, you're right. Doesn't feel like the real Greg Berhalter. And I don't think he can ever portray himself as anything but what we're seeing now, because it feels very PR friendly.
I think the problem with that situation with Gio is that it would be hypocritical at this point, because there are times where Pulisic wasn't seeing the pitch consistently, and now obviously Gio hasn't seen the pitch for a month and some change now. Of course, that's a little bit different in that sense, but he was averaging something like 37 minutes a game at Dortmund this past season. Not great, what you'd expect and want, but there are plenty of players who consistently getting called in. Hell, Pepe's Weah still gets overall. He's gotten more minutes than Gio has this season as far as per match. But Pepe is probably the poster child for this, as far as a player who's not getting a lot of playing time. He's making the do with the minutes he's getting, of course.
10 to 15.
But he's not. But he's still considered our second striker at this point because that.
I would say with regard to Pepe, he's done really well in the role that we will probably use him for as well, which is coming off the bench and being a spark. And he's demonstrated he could be very valuable for PSV in that capacity. So for better or for worse, if you're Ricardo Pepe, you're like, shit, now now they want me to replicate the same thing. I mean, how am I ever going to break in if I got a Luke de Jong or a Flo Balogun in front of me?
Anytime soon? What the heck?
Yeah, I don't know. He just scores goals for fun in the Eredivisie. But I mean, it's different for different players, but I think the emotional baggage, I guess I bring up the Brendan Aronson thing, and I haven't really had time to extrapolate this idea on Call It What You Want. But one of the things that we probably will discuss, because we're heading to Dallas to do a couple shows, which is very cool for the Nations League. But if like, given Brendan Aronson's response to not being brought in, it would have been cool to see Gio Reyna if he hadn't got called, and do have that same kind of moment. Now he's got to be playing to have that moment, but maybe it could have lit a fire under him in a way that where he's starting to train a little bit better and whatever it may be. So you give him the luxury of coming in and still calling him in, which I get. I get why you would call him in, and because we have done it with Christian Pulisic before. Yeah, he's talented and he's demonstrated he can be a difference maker for us, especially in this competition as he did last year when he didn't have very many minutes either, but he still came in and was very pivotal. And in some ways, I hope changed the complexion of our midfield in terms, hey, we should run with a 10 because it allows some of our, if we're not playing inverted wingers or if we are slightly, that just gives us some more flexibility to have a fourth attacking type player be more of the connective tissue from our midfield to our front line. And so, I want to see more of the 10, or I want to see a double striker. I think that there's some value.
I don't think you're going to get to see that, Jimmy.
I would agree on that too, but I don't think it's going to happen.
No, Brett is a big double striker guy. I'm just happy that Greg, after BJ and Hudson showed the way, that Greg probably at that point had no choice almost but to say, okay, yeah, we're going to play a real 10, because before that we were stuck with the standard 4-3-3 that the women also played, by the way, that looked like crap, and now they've stopped playing it too, thank God. But that 4-3-3, the way it was it was horrible. So I think if you're going to bring and you're going to play a 4-2-3-1 and you're going to play a CAM, you might as well bring Reyna. He is the most talented player at that position. How many minutes is he going to get? I don't know.
I wouldn't start him. I think that would set a precedent that I wouldn't feel comfortable with. When you clearly have someone in Malik Tillman who plays this very similar role and who has been very good this season and continues to get better. So, but it's not like he's just doing it in Eredivisie. He's doing it in the Borussia Dortmund and Champions League. There's enough there. So I would start with Tillman, and then you can go from there.
But Pulisic's already set the precedent. He wasn't playing at Chelsea. He came in played great for us. So,
and
I get it. There's a precedent set, but I wouldn't start Gio.
I'll also say though that there's a difference in the quality of depth, that consideration. So if you drop Pulisic, who's going to take over Pulisic?
Well, that's true.
The quality and depth drops significantly,
especially in that game that we're referencing. Yeah.
In comparison to say Reyna and Tillman, yes, there's still a quality gap in my opinion, personally. Not as deep by any means, but Tillman's playing consistently. He's playing well.
He's playing great.
Some people question about whether or not he can do it on big games when it matters. That was a big thing that they were questioning. But this would be the one window that I would say I wouldn't be opposed to Tillman starting over Reyna.
I think what I haven't seen from Tillman with the national team is him getting the trust of, hey, we're giving you're our main string puller tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm giving you minimum 60 minutes. If you're kicking ass, I might even give you the whole game. But I'm going to give you 60 minutes to go be Malik Tillman. Now, within that, there are some parameters that I need you to play within. This is how we're going to press. This is where we want to trap Jamaica. These are where I need you to, I don't want you to drop too deep, but if you can help, sit on whatever midfielder or whatever it may be, or if you can force the game a certain way based on where our starting position is, this is what I need from you. But outside of that, go do your thing. You've been excellent for PSV. Just talk to Christian about where he wants to pick up the ball. If you get it in certain areas, talk to Timo Weah if he's on the right, talk to Flo Balogun. Have these conversations. I mean, we'll talk about it as a team, but also have these personal conversations about, this is what I used to do with the national team. If I'm under pressure, I'm going to have the ball here. Where can I count on you to be consistently? And these little conversations make a big difference. So if I'm Tillman, I would extend those olive branches and have those talks with the guys around me. And not only the guys in front of me, but also behind. Like if Musa, hey, Yunus, if you end up getting the ball and breaking the lines, I'm going to make sure I'm off of your left shoulder to always be an outlet for you. So you don't have to even look. I'll make sure that I'm there and giving you that angle and that passing lane. These are the little things that I think will make a big difference. But I don't know if he's ever gotten that trust. So to start a game that matters, a game that we need to win, is not some bullshit friendly, then let's see what he looks like. To your point, he does have a bit of a knock on him for not showing up in the biggest games. But when I watched him against Borussia Dortmund over 2 legs, he did create some of the best opportunities that PSV had. He didn't finish those opportunities, but sometimes it's harder. Sometimes it's harder to teach getting into that spot than actually the finishing part of it. So I'm excited. I'm bullish right now on Tillman, and I want to give him that opportunity to make that happen. If you roll out a Gio Reyna in front of him, he's going to be like, well, what the, you're going to lose a couple guys, and that's part of it. If that's the risk, that Greg and the coaching staff wants to take, we're going to roll out Gio no matter what, then there are going to be some ripple effects to that decision. But I think that starting Tillman and bringing Reyna off the bench would probably be the most agreeable non-verbally amongst the group. That's just my 2 cents on that.
Sure.
And to be fair to Tillman, he really hasn't got to play that spot for us yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
We stuck him out wide, so it would be nice to see him get that chance. Yeah, I guess it's a difficult, as Brett said, the difference, the talent difference has closed between Reyna and Tillman. I think
it's getting, sure. I mean, in terms of like undeniable talent, I think Gio's probably one of our best.
I mean, he just screwed himself.
Well, he glides. The guy doesn't run; he glides. Right? When you get the ball, you're like, this isn't even fair. That he can just, his running movements and the ball just sticks to his foot. His ideas and his vision. Right? I mean, obviously, say what you want about his parents on the extracurriculars of life, but damn, they were both ballers, right? So he obviously grew up in a household with ideas about how to play the game and talked about he's a student of the game. He understands the game, right? And that shows in his decision making. But if you gotta back that up with a little bit of that industriousness. And I'm not saying he's got to go track back and like play the 6 and that kind of bullshit, but he still has to do the little things that help make the game a little bit easier for everybody else. And I don't know. I look forward to a couple years down the line when we can reflect on this early Gio Reyna period. I really understand what's making him tick, because his future is incredibly bright because his talent's undeniable. But I think Tillman's got to be the guy because he's been putting it in.
Well, let's also not forget that Greg even came out in an article and mentioned how they know what they can get with Gio. But the big question is, how long are they going to be able to have Gio on the pitch? So does that mean he's going to start but then come off as an early sub again? Or does that mean that Tillman's going to start and he's going to come in as a second half sub?
I would start Tillman and Reyna off the bench for sure. If you even need Gio. I mean, you want to assess where he is, right? And not only physically, but emotionally, right? When there's 4 areas of development. You have physical, tactical, technical, and mental emotional. And you want to assess where all 4 guys are. Technically, obviously, these guys are all sound, but are they match sharp, right? That's part of the technical side. Tactically, they're coming in from different systems. How do they fit into what I want to do? And this is part of Greg's job. How do you put those pieces together of the puzzle against this particular opponent who are going to, I mean, listen, this Jamaica team against Canada over 2 legs, they were down 1-0 in leg 2 in Canada, scored 3 goals in the second half. They decided to press a little bit higher and force Canada to make some mistakes, and they absolutely punished them in transition. Yeah, I know they're missing a couple players, but that shouldn't take away from the fact that they have a pretty good idea and identity of how they want to play. And I think their coach is Hamer Hallgrimsson. I think he's good. I think he's solid. And
he's good. No doubt. Here's my thing here, though, with Reyna. So wasn't getting a lot of playing time with Dortmund this season. Made what looks now to be, I'm going to have to eat some serious freaking crow because I got Nuno all wrong on this. It looks like he's not going to play that much for Nottingham Forest.
You even have Forest fans that are livid the fact that Reyna hasn't even been tested yet. So
yeah, so here he is. He's made a series of bad mistakes. He's got to be suffering in some way mentally, and now you're going to bench him for the national team. Or is this an opportunity to play him, start him, and get him going, and let him exert get some of his demons out of his system, and maybe we see an Aronson-like performance like we saw at Union Berlin this weekend. I don't know. How much do you want to punish the kid for making a bad decision? For
me, this isn't even a punishment, though, Derek. Mm-hmm. This is just current form. This is you're not playing for your club team. You haven't played regularly. But I appreciate the counter argument here because there is some validity to what you're saying. And you can make a strong argument as to let's take this Jamaica game and these 2 games as a way to build him back up like we had done with Christian Pulisic. However, the Christian Pulisic stuff, they were 2 friendlies in Europe and against opponents that were solid, but the game didn't make or break one way or the other. The Nations League, whether you think they're glorified friendlies or not, are still a real competition that matter. We're the back-to-back champs. We want to maintain that. So there has a little bit more juice on these, which is why they created the Nations League in the first place. And I don't know if it's like for like with where Christian was because those ones were friendlies and this one is not. that we were going to sacrifice a potential spot where somebody's playing well just to get somebody's confidence going. I think I want us to be grown past that, I guess, in some ways as a program.
Sure.
But I understand where you're coming from. And I wonder what Greg's going to decide to do. But what's his attitude when he comes back? You know, how are the players responding to him, right? There's a lot of baggage with this particular group of players and Gio, given what happened in Doha, that I still think, I don't know if it's bubbling under the surface. I know they've all moved past it, but if you've got a guy there that has potentially quit on the team for whatever reason, whatever his reasons were, you're still always a little leery of where they're at. And if they're not in a good mood or not in a good place at that particular moment, you know, you want guys out there that you know are going to kind of match the intensity and drive that you have. And this feels like I'm taking a really big a shot at Gio. I don't know where he is, where it's all speculative about if he's not a good trainer at practice, right? And he just kind of, he's an Eeyore. He could be potentially an Eeyore, and coaches don't respond to Eeyores, or everything's the worst and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. But something is not clicking in a couple different environments, whether it's with the US in the World Cup, whether it's with Dortmund, or whether now with Forest. Like, I don't know. Is there a common denominator existing in all three of those environments?
So,
it's hard to say.
Real quickly, I'll cover two things here on that front, because I want to cover what Derek was saying, and then I'll cover what you just brought up here in a second. I don't want the national team to be treated as a charity in this situation. If Greg's going to start Gio, it's because he feels like that's going to be the best player who's going to get the result. Period. I don't want him to worry about, well, if he plays and he has a good, maybe it's going to rebound on the club level. That's not what I want. I don't want the national team to be like that. I want him to go out and say, I want Gio out there because I feel like he's going to do the best, or I want Tillman out there because I feel like he's going to provide the best. My take on that.
That's good.
As far as Gio's the issues he's encompassed ever since the World Cup, or even slightly before then, he's a little mopey. He was a bit mopey of a player prior to that too. But the debacle down in the World Cup has been covered ad nauseum. You know, we covered it for 6 straight months, easy.
We covered it better than anybody else did.
We had
Hate
Gio
to brag, but we did.
Nailed down. But his time at Dortmund, as far as all the words coming from the coaching staff, coming from the press, he was perfectly fine as a player there. Whether it's training, whether it's playing the games, the big difference there is that Terzic simply didn't rate his defensive capabilities in his system.
Sebastian Kiel came out, though, sporting director for Dortmund, and basically said, if you read the tea leaves, that he wasn't training as well as he could have.
Oh, I missed that one.
Yeah. I'll have to find that. We talked about it on our podcast. That was an interesting choice of words from Sebastian Kiel.
Dig it up and send it my way, please.
Yeah, okay.
No,
I missed that. As far as everything coming out of Forest right now, I mean, all the obviously I'm not there. I can't see it and everything like that. I only know what the people, any of the podcasts that I watch for Forest at this point, which I never watched prior to Gio going there, of course, but I'm watching now, and all the words coming down is that he's absolutely killing it in practice. I personally think at this stage of the game is that Nuno has his set, trio in the midfield, like the Doys, the Rigi, the Alangas out wide. You have Gibbs White not going to come out at all ever. The only time that Gio could go in for Gibbs White is if Gibbs White's taking over for Yates at the box to box,
or he gets syphilis.
I just think this is a situation where he's dug his heels in. This is his squad, and maybe Gio comes in for 6 minutes at the very end, or 1 minute if they get a late 89th goal, and
or none at all.
I don't know.
I think the team, when I think about Forest, they have some pacey wingers, and that seemed to be even prior to Nuno. That's how they were building their team. And that's not the player profile that Gio has. So he'd really have to displace Gibbs White at this point, and that's not going to happen. The guy wears the number 10 shirt, and I think he wears a captain's armband every once in a while. So it was going to be really hard to go in there and unseat him. So yeah, ultimately it was a terrible transfer, and I wish there would have been more thought to. Well, maybe there was. That's another thing. Why weren't there more takers on a guy that's clearly as talented as we all think he is?
They were asking for too much.
Potentially.
Yeah. I mean, they were asking for what we understand was too much. and also to pay his salary. So, or a big chunk of his salary. And a lot of teams are like, we can't afford that.
I feel like in a couple of years, we're going to know a lot more.
I think it all boils down.
I'm looking forward to kind of getting more insight on Gio in particular.
I think it all boils down to Gio wanted out of Terzic, and this was his agent saying, "Hey, I can get you in over here." And
that sounds right.
Been like, "Hey, we'll take him, but I promise nothing."
Right.
Right. And to your point, even people were talking about whenever Reyna played out wide for Dortmund, it's like, oh, he played out wide. He could play winger for them. Well, it's two different styles altogether.
Yeah,
the wingers they're just outside strikers at that point. They never really check back into the defense rarely, which is completely different than how Force is playing. So it's a tough situation for him in that.
Force got to play conservative at this point. They just want to stay up. So
yeah, right.
All right, Brett, hit us with. You might have to skip forward a bunch of topics because we're running out of time with Jimmy.
Yeah, I don't know how long.
I give long answers. I do that on purpose.
Well, we'll stay here all night, Jimmy. We don't care, but we're just trying to be thoughtful about your time. Jose Reyes says, by the way, Jimmy, your humble response. If the second part of my super chat was read, that's what I meant. I started late and had to.
I love it.
Smarter. Okay.
I love that. I love that.
I became a ball playing defender for my club in college late in development.
It took me a while to really just trust myself because okay, maybe I'm shortchanging. I could do a few things, but it took me a while to really find that consistency. So shout out to you, Jose. I appreciate you.
You had a very good spatial awareness. I'll give you that much. You weren't the fastest.
Didn't need to be though. Pirlo wasn't the fastest either, and that guy was hot shit.
Exactly. You're not small. What are you, 6'1"?
6'2".
6'2". You're Brett size. All right. I'm a diminutive 5'11". All right. Alex Martinez. Alex Martinez for 199. What U.S. men's national team would beat today's U.S. men's national team?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
It's a hot one.
I'll leave my bias out of it, and I'll pick a different era. I mean, the 2002 World Cup team, landed in DeMarcus's first World Cup.
Yep,
they were our young players. You had McBride in his prime. You had Eddie Pope, Tony Santa, Brad Friedel was in goal. Frankie Haydick was our Brendan Aronson, I would say at that point. Just buzzing around. You had Reyna. John O'Brien John O'Brien is sick. Such a good player. Pablo Mastroianni obviously started to emerge in 2002, and that was a good team. And I think 2002 also had some depth to it. And I think that 2002 would have given a run to this current team for sure.
No, we had John O'Brien on. Talk about a sad ending to what was a bright career, and he kind of walked us through like these nagging injuries that just would never go away. And it was just kind of a painful interview to listen to because both Brett and I were around for that time, and everybody had such high hopes because of how he was performing in Holland, and it just fizzled out. I don't even know what he's doing these days. I hope
he is. Well. He has got his PhD. He's a psychologist now.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Good for him. And that's coming from a guy that kind of could sound like a surfer dude on occasion. When we talk to him.
Yeah. He's in Southern California. I remember he's a couple years younger than me, and we'd be at like a local youth tournament. And people would be whispering, "Hey, John O'Brien's here," some 12-year-old, 13-year-old phenom. So we'd go watch him play, and the guy just never lost the ball. Just never lost the ball. It was incredible, and you just had that kind of level of professionalism that you see in certain ways. I guess that the big time youngster now is Kevin Sullivan, and when I watch him play, not to say they're the same type of player, but he doesn't lose the ball either, right? And just makes good soccer decisions, great instincts, good awareness. You talked about spatial awareness, incredible spatial awareness, situational awareness. And so John O'Brien had a lot of those gifts as well that just and everything slowed down when he had the ball. It was awesome. I loved being on his team because I could play him the ball in any situation. I could stitch him up and play him a ball like at his knee and maybe I did on occasion, put it at his knee when he's got like two people closing him down, and he would somehow bring it down and then make the right pass out of it. And you're like, God damn it. You get these little moments of what world class looks like. And I've got to play against world class players too. And they're just so consistently good at making everything look easy. And that's a gift. It isn't a gift.
Kind of a tragedy. I mean, same thing with Stu, being, having his legs broken multiple times.
Yeah,
brutal, absolutely brutal.
Yeah, brutal. Spencer Dirty for 569 says, Jimmy, you should come coach some teams here in Indiana for sure. Fort Wayne FC would be super cool. Shout out to Beasley, he says.
Yes, shout out to DeMarcus. I am partnering with DeMarcus in that $77 million winner-take-all tournament once again. We got to the quarterfinals last year, TST, and lost to Mike McGee and Sneaky Fox. But we're coming back this year. We've switched our name from Conrad and Beasley United to Quick Goal FC because they are going to help sponsor the quite expensive entry fee and all the other bills that come with getting the team into this tournament and taking care of all the players. So shout out to Quick Goal and to Bees. I love doing this with him. But Bees is so in on Fort Wayne and his USL League 2 squad, and hopefully they move up the ladder at some point in USL, and it's exciting times for him. And I told him if I ever find myself in Fort Wayne, I'll come volunteer coach at some point. But Bees is great.
Fort Wayne's it's kind of you will have
it's there. It exists.
No, it's the home of DeMarcus Beasley, and that's all that matters, fellas.
That's all that matters.
So, shout out to Spencer and Spencer too, of course. What's up?
No, and I did a conference there like 5 or 6 years ago, and everybody knew DeMarcus Beasley and the Beasley family. Like they're big there. They're big in Fort Wayne.
And DeMarcus. Yeah,
the town itself, it's all right. It's all right. Cubona maker. It sounds like something.
Cubone maker.
It almost sounds perverse. All right, $9.99. I think we saw Greg's tactical ceiling when we played the Dutch and got obviously outcoached, which the Dutch coach made sure everybody knew. Hope I'm wrong, but I think we will see more of it this summer. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, my retort to that is, well, we're going to have this is a great competition to find out, and has Greg actually evolved as a coach as well, given I think how exhaustive he is in terms of doing homework and being a student himself of being a coach. From what I understand, he's asking a ton of questions and sitting in on a bunch of world-class coaches around the world and taking probably those comments to heart from Louis Van Gaal. I would expect that we would see an evolved version of him. But at times, the challenge could be, is he now going to overcomplicate it to try to make up for the fact that he's being looked at as maybe not as tactically savvy as he could be? And that's tricky, I would say. And sometimes you just got to let your players do what they do best and put them in the best positions to succeed. But I listen, I've said it before. I'll say it again, just so we're all on the same page. I don't think any national team coach should have the job for more than one World Cup cycle. I think the players need to hear a new voice.
Preach.
We agree. Yeah. And you know,
one cycle club.
The sad thing was seeing Lawless go back on this 4-year. I mean, this is something he'd been saying forever. He said 4 years, no more. 4 years, that's it. But then he said, but not on this occasion because it's not fair to Greg. No, dude, it's 4 years. Period. Don't change your opinion just because there's some weird ass situation because Greg went and spoke at this immoral leadership conference and spewed some silly stuff and that got leaked. And then now everybody knows the story, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then of course the Reynas did what they did, which was absolutely ridiculously horrible. And so, but you can't change your standard. You can't say, but I'm going to make an exception to that standard now because of what happened on the periphery. Well, if you want to call it periphery, I mean, it was bad. The whole world.
Well, we're gonna find out here about Greg because if the Nations League is one thing, but if we crash and burn in the Copa America, then I think U.S. Soccer has to take a hard look as to whether we want this guy to lead us in 2026. And you know, there might be different options that weren't available for the national team at that time, and we went to rehire somebody else. And maybe they will be available after the Copa America. Who knows? I don't know. But yeah, this is I still think I still feel, and it should be in some capacity because it's a big tournament and all eyes are going to be watching. It's a nice runway into the World Cup. The team needs to show and demonstrate that there's been some growth from our round of 16 performance at the World Cup into this tournament against some stiff competition. And you know, if we're struggling against the Bolivias of the world, you know, and can't create chances or then that needs to be looked at in a real way. That he might not be the right guy to lead us moving forward. But again, I don't think he should have been in this position in the first place. And like I mentioned before with the Gio Reyna part of it, had another coach been in place, that coach would have been a lot easier for him to address the Gio Reyna situation without any emotional baggage. But because of what exists already and Greg's still in charge, I think he's obligated to take him, because if he didn't, the uproar would be so batshit crazy, it would detract from, you know, the team and what they're trying to perform. But by him bringing him in, that's for me the easier of the paths, as opposed to leaving him out, even though we could argue he hasn't been sharp and hasn't played in quite some time. So, or not regularly for quite some time. And there's better.
I think you got to bring him in, even if that shit doesn't happen, Jimmy.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Listen, it's not going to.
You don't have to start, hard, but
it's not going to have to be hard that hard to sway me. But I'm just saying that if there was another coach in place, they just could have looked at this whole player pool without any tethers from the previous cycle, right? And I think that that's a healthy thing for the program that we are now going to miss out on. And so it's going to suck if we have to suffer and not play well. And not to say there's a guarantee that a new coach would have. I want to say that too. We could have brought in whoever, and they still could have stumbled and struggled through the Nations League and Copa America too. There's no guarantee that some grass is going to be greener with somebody else. That needs to be said too. But I just think for the players, and because I lived it, I was part of Bruce Arena's second time around, and I benefited from it. But I wonder at times if the players just needed to hear something different. And I say that with nothing but love for Bruce.
Yeah, I mean, you can only hear somebody's voice for so long, and you do need there. I think it's just natural that, you know, you become. I mean, you look at most national teams; they do have turnover, and it is because, you know, a voice is heard. And it's heard, and it's heard, and after a while, you kind of tune it out. You just tune it out. So, yeah. Tony Masters says for $5, thank you, Tony. What is there a joke in there I missed? Tony?
No, just me for a U.S. national team head coach now.
Oh, okay.
I think it would be a lot of fun to be around this collection of players and to try to get the most out of them for sure. I mean, if I put my coaching hat on, it would be a big thrill. But yeah, I mean, Greg's making the big bucks. They decided to go with him, so we gotta back him, right? We gotta see what he can do, especially through Copa America. And if there's the Nations League, obviously we need to win it, and if we can smash Mexico along the way, then that's a cherry on top. But Copa America is really the benchmark and really what I'll be judging him on. And if it doesn't look good and the team looks a little not necessarily lackluster, but just lacking ideas, and we're not getting consistently good movement from the guys, which, hey, some of the players have to take responsibility for this too. And like when we didn't qualify in 2018, there's still some responsibility. Like you still need players to go out there and make plays. They still need to go out there and make good soccer decisions. But it's up to the coach to put them in positions to succeed and have a plan in place that to the point before we had plan A against the Dutch, and it didn't feel like we reverted back to plan B or even had a plan. That's what it felt like. Didn't have a plan B. I'm sure there was plan A, plan B, plan C, but it wasn't quickly adopted, or we couldn't figure it out. And they had our number, and they didn't really seem troubled. One of the things that I evaluate, and I don't know if you guys talk about this a lot, is did as a team, did we make the other team suffer? Did we have them on the back foot? Were we asking questions of them that they didn't have answers for? Some teams, if we play, I don't know why El Salvador jumped in my mind, but when we play El Salvador, they're going to sit. They're going to sit and absorb, and they're comfortable with that. How do we make them uncomfortable? And the more that we can do that consistently, the better we are as a team, no matter who we're playing against. El Salvador, Uruguay, Brazil, Colombia, Argentina, doesn't matter, right? It's can we ask more questions than they're asking of us? And that's what I try to judge the influence and impact of a coach on the style and tactics that we're implementing.
Yeah, but so here's what we see though, right, Jimmy? We don't see that enough because once we are, get the possession, we go into the final third of the other team, and we kind of kick it around the shoehorn, right around the outside.
Plan B is plan A with just different players.
Then back to the center back back to the left back up to the right winger back to the left back to the center back back to, oh no, we'll try a little midfield pass. It's all around the horn. It's the final third where we seem to suffocate completely. There's no creativity, and every pass, and we covered a game live not long ago, one of the live, and I was predicting where the next pass was going 30 seconds before it happened because it's the patterns of play are so predictable.
Is this January camp? Are you talking about January camp?
No, I'm talking about U.S. men's national team games that Greg coaches that are in some ways meaningful. But what was the game, Brett, that we were calling it live?
We were doing the Trinidad and Tobago game. The one we're doing.
That's
live.
it. Yeah.
Like it was funny because Derek was like, "All right, it's gonna go to Des. It's gonna go to Wade. It's gonna go back to Des. It's gonna go here." And I thought he was a few seconds ahead of me, but actually, he was a few seconds behind me. He was just predicting what was going to happen ahead of time.
The patterns of play, Jimmy, they're too predictable. Like we all know the triangle pass. We all know that stuff, but
So I'll jump in and say very quickly that you need, and we have guys that have it. It's just a matter of whether they get the freedom and confidence to do it and have those decisions reinforced in a positive way. And I'd be really surprised if they weren't. But I would say that there's a feel for the game that needs to have that a team needs to have, and then you have to have individuals that can sense it too. And ultimately, what that means is this team is taking this away from us. So how do we exploit that? Right? There's if they're going to crowd the midfield, there's space somewhere. How quickly can we identify that space, and how quickly can we get the ball there? And that feel is something that is hard to teach at times. But it's something that can be reinforced through consistent decision making of like, hey, we identified these areas, and how do we take advantage of that? We'll go back to the Dutch game. Sorry, I'm kind of talking in circles here, but the Dutch took away our flanks, right? They just overloaded the flanks and made us play through the middle, and they put a lot of numbers in there too. We just didn't have enough ideas to unlock that in a meaningful way. Sometimes that's hitting in an early cross. On paper, that looks kind of hopeful, but it's also a signal of intent that we want to make something happen. And there is some method to the madness. It's not just this hopeful ball. We've actually talked about it. And what's interesting is if you hit an early cross, most crosses, if you're going to get it's the timing of the runs. Yes, the service is incredibly important, but the timing of the run. So if we know as a team that, hey, listen, they're sitting back, and I guess what bums me out, I'll say this is what bums me out about the Dutch game, the round of 16, is that Holland's tactics were pretty clear in the first half.
Yep.
And it didn't feel like we made any adjustments at halftime that made an impact other than like, let's bring on Gio Reyna. That was really the only, like, that's what bummed me out the most. It's okay. Hey, listen, we have a couple plans we think are going to work against the Dutch. In the first half, it's not really working. Yeah, Christian had a great opportunity 2 minutes in. That would have changed. I don't know if it changes the end result, but maybe would have made the Dutch suffer a little bit, right?
Sure.
But outside of that, we didn't have too much. And so there was that in-game management that I think everybody gets frustrated with, Greg. And that was one moment where I didn't see enough of hey, we're under a ton of pressure. We're getting outplayed right now. Cool. That's what it is, what that was. Now, what can we do to adjust, given the players that we have on the field, to now hurt the Dutch in a way where they're starting to think, oh, shit. And we never got them in that oh, shit mode. Sure, we're scrambling, whatever. And so there just wasn't a lot of those types of adjustments. And I mean, this is a lot. There's a lot to unpack here about this. But these are the little things that I'll be paying attention to, not only in the Nations League, but also in Copa America.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Brett.
I was going to say it's the same issue going back to the Trinidad and Tobago home game we had just recently. It was the same situation. They sat back and they bunkered more or less for 80 or for the entire game, but for 80 minutes they sat back and we played it around in our horseshoe play. We tried to do some crosses and we didn't really try to break them down. And it was just a question of why aren't we recognizing that this play right here isn't working against the bunker defense. And one thing that can open it up is taking shots from outside the box. We didn't realize that until all of a sudden, like the 80th minute, when we finally started doing it, and it opened it up. We had goals come through.
And we didn't hit them on the transition either. Like when they had possession and then they lost it suddenly, we didn't go, okay, bam, before they can get back in their low block, let's hit them fast. Let's attack now. No, it was about, okay, we got possession. Now we're going to kick it back to the center backs, and we're going to kind of mosey the ball up the pitch. It was frustrating to watch.
Yeah, I think some of this is on the players too, because you need players, again, that I mentioned, that want to make plays on both sides of the ball. And so it's like taking the responsibility. I'm going to do something. So we have players that do it. Yes, Sergio Dest does it. Anthony Robinson are very good at, like, I'm going to go forward and do something. It might not be what we talked about, but I'm going to do something, you know? And when I get my outside backs in particular, if we're going to commit a number going forward that could make us vulnerable defensively, then they got to get something out of it. It's got to be a cross, a corner, a deep throw in our favor, a shot, and a potential assist, whatever it is. They need to get something positive. As they say in the coaching world, you got to bring attacks to completion. One of Heath Pierce's favorite phrases as well. And
I've never heard that one.
Yeah, but you got to bring attacks to completion. So to your point, we get to the final third. We do really well to get to that spot. And then it's like, oh, I don't want to lose the ball here. I don't want to take that risk. So I'm going to give it to the next guy. And the next guy's like, well, I've got 15 guys on my back now, so I'm going to play it safe. And the other guy's like, well, now we've kind of lost the momentum and because the other team's got back behind the ball, so let's just play it safe. And then it just kind of leads to what you guys are talking about and gets kind of a horseshoe because nobody really wants to take that moment and then hit a hopeful ball. Everybody's trying to make that killer pass. And sometimes the hopeful ball, if everybody's on the same page that it's coming and it's something you need to talk about, it's not about that initial ball. It can be, if obviously the service is good and the timing of the runs are good, but it's more about how do we win the second ball? Can we be in good positions to win that second ball? Because that's almost more dangerous for defensive teams because you've been pulled out of position in some ways because you had to defend the initial ball. But if the attacking team can win the second ball, then the defensive team's scrambling a little bit. So there's a lot of value in that. But again, there has to be some methodology behind it. And I'll give everybody an example. Oh, long ball, bullshit, whatever. I remember watching Sir Alex Ferguson, the Manchester United teams that were, the Beckham, Neville, Roy Keane years.
Yeah.
And what they did when Gary Neville got the ball at the right back position, if he couldn't find, you could see this passing patterns happen. If he couldn't find David Beckham out wide on the right side right away, what they would do is David would go up high to try to engage the left back of the opposing team. And so then he would go wide. And so if the left back was on David, that was a cue for Gary Neville to drop it into that space behind the left back. And then it would force a 1v1 with whoever was up top at the time. Andy Cole, Dwight York. I don't think Ruud van Nistelrooy was on that group, but they would have that space, right? Because that channel would be open because they were attending to David Beckham. But if Beckham didn't have, or the left back didn't step to him, then they would get the ball to David as soon as possible, and then he would go support the play, and they go from there. But they would hit this long ball, and I bring this up because they would hit that long ball into that gap. It wouldn't go out of bounds for a goal kick. It wouldn't go out for a throw-in, but it would turn the center back around. That even if the center back for the opposing team got the ball, that guy was screwed because what is he going to do? He's going to stitch up his goalkeeper by playing a hard ball, right? Or he's got to somehow with an attacker on his back try to get the ball towards the sideline and whip it up the line. I mean, the guy was screwed. So there's a lot of genius to that particular pass, that type of movement as a team. And then what United would do was that they would just win the second ball and then they would play, right? They would play from the second ball when now the opposing team was stretched out in different ways to where United would work on that type of transition play. I think that you need to have teams that have that type of fluidity and flexibility in their tactics. It gets a little bit harder when you have teams like a Trinidad. They're going to sit 10 players on top of the box. You're not going to have that room in behind, but you can hit hopeful crosses in and still try to pepper that, win in that sec ball. Just stay on the front foot ultimately. And yes, we're not going to score every shot, but can we ask questions? That shit's hard when you're a center back and you're getting pelted and everything you clear out is just coming right back down your throat. You're like, I would rather be any place in the world right now than here because we are getting absolutely bamboozled.
So here's the great thing. We just played a clip a number of shows ago where Roy Keane, Gary Neville, and Jamie Carragher were having this discussion. and they were talking about their days with Ferguson at Man United. And they all were saying the same thing. We never really used to talk about tactics that much. There were the basics. If the left back went forward, the right back stayed. If the one center midfielder went forward, the other one stayed. But Ferguson never got into like patterns of play and all this other, wanky stuff. He basically put us on the field and said, go get it. Here's the basic. Here are some basic tenets. Boy, we're getting so far away from that now, Jimmy. I mean, we were really
that's not Greg. That's pretty much around the world. And I would probably blame Pep Guardiola at this point because he's like, he loves the details. And I think there's a lot of power in understanding the details, but it's, can you get everybody on your team seeing the same things at the same time so that the decision-making is very purposeful? At times it feels like I say it like this. I like my teams to be anticipatory as opposed to reactive, and whether we have the ball or not. And I feel at times our national team feels a little bit more reactive than they should be, given the quality of player that we now have consistently through our team.
Even Pep, though, says when it comes to the final third, and he said this in a recent interview, he said, when it comes to the final third, there are no tactics. It's all about the players. It's all about their creativity. It's what they come up with. He said,
I call bullshit on that, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, that's what he said.
That's what he said, though, but
I'm just quoting him.
I get it, but they consistently look for that back post play, right? Yeah. I mean, like there's clearly some ideas. Okay, fair enough that he's letting them to make their own decisions. Whereas I think in most of the other parts of the field, if you don't play a certain pass at a certain time, he's going to be up your ass on the sideline for sure. And probably in the film room. But I bet you he does give a lot of that tactical freedom in the final third. However, clearly some ideas in terms of, hey, we're playing against a low block, and they play against low blocks a lot. That kind of that late run to the back post where you have little tiny Bernardo Silva winning headers and scoring goals. There's clearly some method behind that for sure. But ultimately, I get where he's coming from, but I don't think that's the full truth.
sort of to what you were talking about when you were referring to Man U of old. One thing I think we as a team need to start incorporating more of is, if we're gonna do the horseshoe passing or whatever, try to pull the team into one side and then just give the ball to West and let him just change the point of attack. You have Pulisic, you have Weah, who are they're major pace, players on the wing. I'll take those one-on-ones any day of the week.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I don't know if I've shared the story with you guys before or not, but I was playing with Kansas City, and Eddie Johnson was on my team at the time, who was a fantastic 1v1 player, and he was just going through a spell where he just didn't feel as confident, was looking to play safe at that particular moment. And he got himself in a 1v1 spot, similar to what you're referencing. He's on the corner of the box or near the top of the box, out wide though, coming inside. And he got framed up. The guy was defending him okay, but Eddie didn't run at him with that Eddie swagger that we know that he's capable of. And he played it back, and we didn't get anything out of the opportunity. Just kind of muted, kind of vanilla, right? Just like, great. We didn't get anything. I pulled him aside at halftime. I said, listen, I work my ass off back here, back in the back line, so that you can go one-on-one at people. I don't give a shit if you lose the ball, but it's disrespectful to me if you don't take that guy on, because I know you're better than him, like 100 times better than that guy. And you're letting him come to you're playing to his level as opposed to trying to get him to match you, and he can't. But you let him off the hook there. And so anytime you can lose it 99 out of 100 times. I don't care. But do not shy away from taking somebody on one-on-one, because you're going to know that I'm pissed. I'm going to be up your ass, because it just means that you're scared to do it. And I don't have time for that, because I know you're better than that. And that's what you play for. You play for those numerical advantages. And I see it even with the teams that I coach. They get into those situations. They've created 1v1s. They've created 2v1s, and they'll just play safe as opposed to just putting a dangerous ball in the box. And if the timing of the runs are right there, hey, guess what? It's going to be a great ass goal, but you don't know until you have to take your advantages when they're given to you. And again, it goes back to when I'm thinking about the Dutch game. The Dutch were giving us something. We just couldn't take advantage of it. We weren't in the pockets of space that could really hurt them consistently. Sure, every once in a while, and Christian's chance demonstrates that we found some pockets, but ultimately, that falls on the coaching staff who have halftime to address those things. And it does fall on the players. Hey, this isn't working. Let's look at each other. What should we think about doing? And that obviously comes from a lot of good coaching and building a foundation along the way. So the players feel empowered to kind of call an audible, right? Hey, the coach has called one play, but we're going to go with something else because this is what we're seeing on the field. We're in the moment. And maybe I would like to see that a little bit more from our players at times.
Well, you just nailed it.
Yeah.
This is an existential thing almost because, we watch these same players play under BJ and Hudson, and they just looked a little bit more free. Mm-hmm. They did. Even they mentioned it.
Pepe mentioned, yeah.
Scally. They said it was more freedom. Mm-hmm. And, we didn't feel constrained. So I think
that goes back to my don't have the same coach for because in some ways when you let's look at it from Greg's perspective. You come back, you look back on your first World Cup cycle. Cool. I thought I did well at this. I need to improve here, whatever it is. He's just going to come back. And if he's already super analytical, that guy's going to triple down on that. It's not going to get he's not going to get looser. Maybe he would be like, I need to relax in certain areas and let players be themselves. And maybe he is in certain ways. But if you're hitting that type of vocabulary from some of the players in their interviews, that's not a good sign, which is not to say that another coach wouldn't have come in and been a tactical mastermind that's asking and handcuffing the players from being who they want. That definitely could have happened. But
is Greg coming on your show ever?
Probably not now after this, but it's I don't know.
You guys have been pretty critical on your own show. I mean,
no, of course. I don't know if he is or isn't. I don't know. If he comes on the show, sure, there could be some awkwardness to work through because of our criticisms, but whatever. We're just going to talk to him real talk, and he can decide what he wants to answer and what he doesn't.
I mean, he went on Herc's show, right? And they've been super critical. He and Seb. Lawless has been more forgiving, so I understand why he goes on there. I guess my point is, at what point do you have to worry about how far and deep your criticism goes? Because we've covered it here. We've covered covered 3 or 4 journalists already, who either been blackballed by MLS teams, their reporters, and or have been blackballed by US Soccer. And so, how careful do you have to be?
I try to approach it. It's a good question. I try to approach it in a way where it's not personal. And I try to approach it in a way where I'm thoughtful about the challenges that he has as a coach. Some of them are inherited, that just exists because of the player pool. Some of it he brings upon himself. And I look at it the same. I was probably harsher on Jurgen Klinsmann, to be honest, mainly because I had higher expectations for Jurgen, and I was a little let down. And I was drinking the Kool-Aid of his used salesman stuff, and South Korea just went through it. So it was nice to see that I wasn't necessarily wrong in my evaluation of him. But I think he's a great ideas guy. I just don't know if he's the guy you want executing those ideas. And with regard to Greg, whatever. If he wants to make it personal and doesn't want to talk to me ever, then hey, that's part of my job, and it is what it is. Whatever. I don't know.
Herc called him a Muppet. Yeah. So you can't go any further than that, and I'm sure he'll still go on ESPN and FC and do an interview. So I guess there's some people who are above it and others that aren't.
Yeah, it's up to him. I actually think he's done a good job of kind of entertaining all types of criticism for the most part and being open to that part of the conversation. So fair play to him on that.
Yeah.
He's gotten very good at this, the PR side. I'll be honest. It's not a side of him that I saw regularly when we were players. Again, we were competing for the same position on the team. So
sure,
it wasn't like he was going to be my buddy, frankly.
But your teammates, he should have been.
No, national team, professional environment, man, you're competing to put food on the table. It's different.
I get it. Yeah.
Your friends are in Sunday leagues and maybe your college team, but once you get into the pro ranks, yeah, you're friendly and you can be friendly. And you might be friends. You probably will be friends with a few of the guys, but man, you're survival, and that's just the way it goes. That's just the environment, and that exists at the national team too. And you hope that you have a culture that still has positive vibes despite that. I actually think the national team's probably a little bit easier in that sense, because you get paid by the national team, but not like in the same paycheck to paycheck type stuff. So yeah, it's different. It's just different. But I want him to do well. Like that should be my preface for everything. I want him and the team to do well. But
well, any of those idiots that are out there, well, I hope we lose and get crushed in the Nations League, and so Greg loses job. That's uncool, dude. I would never.
Not even 100% positive that he would end up losing his job, even if he blamed out a Copa.
Right.
Fair.
So don't wish bad things on the team. You know, that's where we draw. Well, we draw lots of lines, but that's one of them. It's like if you're coming out and saying, I hope Greg gets his ass kicked and the team loses, so Greg loses his job. Don't do that.
Right.
That's a step beyond, or many steps beyond. BC for $2 says, Jimmy, what went wrong at the 2007 Copa for the U.S.? I imagine you have an answer to that.
I think part of it was that we had to have 2 tournaments and 2 teams. So we won the Gold Cup in 2007 and then had to split the team to go down to Copa America. And I think that was a really difficult transition. And you know, shout out to Bob Bradley for trying to manage that and trying to figure out the best way to have competitive teams at 2 different tournaments while still being thoughtful of the national or the club teams. Because some players played in both tournaments, but not everybody could. And he had to be probably quite political in making sure that he managed that, which just can't be easy. Like, hey, by the way, can I have your player that you pay yearly to play for 8 weeks over the summer? You know, it's just not going to be an easy conversation to have. I was hurt I was supposed to play in both. I had a hammy issue to start Gold Cup, so I just sat that out. Unfortunately, it would have been nice to win another one and to be a part of, you know, Benny Falhaber's sick ass goal to beat Mexico. And then I went down to Copa America and we kind of just hit the ground running. We all met in Chicago. The vibes were a little bit off too, because they had just come off this emotional month of winning the Gold Cup in a dramatic way, coming from behind to beat Mexico. And now not only the players, but the coaching staff now have to like get in place to like now prepare for Argentina and Leo Messi and Roman Riquelme and all these guys. And so that was a challenge in itself, I think, in terms of preparation. I thought we were up 1-0 on Argentina in the first. I mean, honestly, one of the things too is we played probably they got to the final and lost to Brazil 3-0, but we played Argentina first in the group. Had we played them second or third, I think we're looking back on that in a little bit of a different way. If we had played an opponent that we could have run with a little bit more, but we were 1-1 at half in that game, and we just couldn't connect enough passes to like maintain any type of pressure. We didn't really make Argentina suffer. That's probably the best way to say it, to tie it back to something I'd said before. And then in the other game against Paraguay, game 2, which obviously then becomes pivotal if you lose game 1, we were up. I believe we were up 1-0. Rico Clark scored, and then we just gave up a couple honestly shitty goals. Just bad, like a bad back pass to Casey Keller, which led to a goal, which was a 1-1 at the time. I remember Drew Moore missed a sitter, like nobody on him on a set piece, and he just put it right at the goalkeeper, which would have made it 2-2. Like even a tie in that game would have given us a chance in game 3. And we ended up losing it 3-1. They scored on a sick free kick at the end. And that was heartbreaking because we thought we had done enough to win that game, or had the players to win that game. And then the Colombia game, we lost 1-0. But that game was a bit of a rubber match because I don't think we could have gone through at that point. So dead rubber or whatever it is.
Obviously, your memory on the Copa's clearer than mine was. But I just recall that squad obviously not being the same Gold Cup squad. Obviously, had to split it in 2, but I recall it being more of a younger squad, quite frankly. And then what was nice to see from that Copa Cup, because I know Copa is that a lot of people looked back on that as a what they might deem as a failure. But if you look at the roster, I think by the 2010 World Cup, I think there were a good like 5 or 6 players that were on that roster that were part of the World Cup squad as well. So
yeah, there's
a good learning curve.
Totally. I mean, as I've mentioned before, whether it's on this show or somewhere else, when you get to be around world-class players and you get to compete against world-class players and you get to see their decision-making in real time right in front of you, you're going to get better. And you're an idiot if you don't, ultimately. And so I do think there was a lot of value in that tournament. It didn't go the way that we wanted. I remember being in the press conference after the Argentina game, and I've never seen so much press in one room before. It was insane. And basically the number one question was me and Bob, and I can't remember who the other player was. And basically the first question was, why would you disrespect the Copa America by bringing your second team? And I looked at Bob like, I got this one. And I just said, basically, we brought the players that we know are good enough and believe are good enough to compete and to win this tournament. We wouldn't come down here otherwise. Also, you have to take into consideration we had our own domestic tournament that we're trying to manage as well. So it's not an excuse, but we think we have a player pool that's talented enough to manage both tournaments. But Argentina's had a really good game, and we give credit to them, and we wish them the best of success the rest of the tournament.
Freaking Argentina, seriously.
Yeah, I mean, stacked.
Exactly.
But they came off at halftime. They were pissed at each other. They were yelling at each other, Argentina, because it was 1-1, and they just couldn't solve us at all. And so we were there. We hung with them for about 60 minutes, and then we gave up that second one to make it 2-1. And then when we had to go chase the game, we just, the pockets were too big for us to manage, and they got a couple more. But yeah, it was incredible learning experience. And I got to tackle Messi. So me 1, Messi 0 in that particular one. Really, he should just credit me, because I don't think he ever got tackled ever since then. And that I'm the reason.
What about that play in Nashville a few weeks back?
Did he get tackled? I thought he got kicked on the way through. I have like a properly clean.
I appreciate you saying that.
No, it's a follow through. It's a follow through.
So many people are like, "Oh, it's a dirty tackle." I'm like, it wasn't a tackle.
It wasn't a tackle. Yeah.
Al Weinstein, one of our brothers from the tribe, says for $4.99, Big Jim, who are 5 players we aren't talking about enough?
That's a good question. I think that's
5.
I would say that given the amount of attention around the U.S. men's national team and our player pool now, with you guys and so many other passionate outlets out there that really care about the team, most of our players are covered, I would say. It's hard to, everybody's looking to find that one player that they said, I found him first, and so
right.
I think that's harder to say. In terms of who we're talking about in a meaningful way, I mean, you're going to hear a lot about Kevin Sullivan coming up. You're going to hear a lot about Esmir Baraktarovic coming up, as you should. These are good young players. So depending on Kevin, probably won't be a part of the Olympic team. He's a little too young for that, but he'll be a big name, I think, moving forward.
I hope you're right, but I mean,
I hope so too.
He's pretty young.
He is young.
It's early.
It's hard to say, right?
Yeah.
But it's 5 is a lot, because it's hard to know. In terms of 5, we should maybe talk about more.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a huge Diego Luna fan. I think that
we too.
It's just something about, he's got that creative spark to him that I think we're saying our team lacks. So to have him in the fold would be nice. And I know that he had the January camp, and hopefully he'll be with the Olympic team, and he can demonstrate that he deserves more minutes with the senior team. So Diego Luna is one for me. I'd like to see more Caleb Wiley. I think he's got some upside that I'm excited about. And I'm trying to think. Max
Dietz is a player.
Max Dietz. Yeah. Good Firth. He's in this U23 camp, and I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table.
He's not going to be at Firth very long, from what I hear.
Well, that's good.
He'll be moving to a Bundesliga team next season. So
great. So yeah, I mean, was it Tompkinson at Bradford City? These are a couple of the center backs that I'd like to see perform in this U23 camp, especially against France. That is going to be a very difficult game. And so when I think about players we should be talking about more, probably the ones that are youngsters who haven't gotten as much shine. But yeah, it's an exciting time. I mean, we have more depth than ever before, and the pool is awesome. Do you guys ever end this show? Or we just keep going?
No, I got one more question for you, Jimmy.
You say that, but yes, it just keeps going and going.
It just keeps going. This is a 24/7 channel. This is amazing. You guys are amazing.
The irony behind it is we're 2 hours in. I haven't touched a single tab I've got open on my screen,
and we're not going to at this point. So, yeah, we haven't got to a single topic yet, and we're going to skip it. No, because
we'll cover that. We'll cover. No. It's fine that we didn't. Is what I'm saying.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's fine, Jimmy. The conversation was so good. We didn't need to rely on the tabs. But one last question for you. I did want to bring this up.
I got one topic to cover before you have to go.
Sure.
For this.
But mine was on US Soccer's or MLS's decision.
Oh, good. Same topic.
Yeah, good. Not to do what they did this time around. And when we listen to Nelson Rodriguez and we listen to Don Garber, and they're talking about, this tournament sucks because this and that, because it's poorly marketed. And then I think, weren't you guys under some? Didn't some run the marketing for US Soccer for 17 freaking years for this tournament? And now you're going to say now that some's out, some's no longer marketing for US Soccer. Now their marketing sucks, but didn't you market it for 17 freaking years? And I don't get it, Jimmy. Tell me what's going on here. What's going on?
Well, it's about money and control ultimately.
Yes.
And the Leagues Cup is being positioned to make more money. And even when we were players, I could see the value in playing against Mexican league teams on the regular. There's a built-in rivalry. The atmosphere at the stadiums were different when you had a Mexican league team in town as opposed to Real Salt Lake, and they needed to find a way to maximize that. I think that there are dollars to be made there. There are eyeballs to win over potentially, and to have a meaningful competition where there's some juice on it. Those games again, when we play, even in friendlies, if we played a Mexican league team, it just had a different feel. There's a bite to that game because they didn't want to lose to us, and we had something to prove, and you can still see it and you can still feel it. The Leagues Cup still feels a bit manufactured, obviously League One or year one of that. And because we're not traveling down to Mexico, you go down to those games against Mexico, and Philadelphia Union just got slapped around 6-0 by Pachuca.
Oh yeah.
It's a different beast down there. And now you got their fans who, when we went down there initially, I played in the CONCACAF Champions stuff back in the day with San Jose Earthquakes when we won MLS Cup. The fans were like kind of lukewarm, like, all right, here's some American team who gives a shit. Now an American team comes down there and like, we got to stomp on these guys' throats. Let's get them, and I love it. I love that there's that type of stakes and that type of passion and competitiveness on these games now. And I wish the Leagues Cup had that component to it. And I think maybe it would feel like a more whole and well-rounded competition if the MLS teams didn't have that home field advantage throughout the whole tournament.
Sure.
Maybe that changes in the future. And I hope that it does in some capacity. But then that basically eliminates the CONCACAF Champions Cup in some capacity. So it's like they're juggling a few things. I get why they wanted to do it. I was actually a proponent of, wow, this sounds great. But I didn't know that it was going to have to, other things were going to have to be sacrificed, like our domestic
Open
cup competition, the Open Cup. Yeah, which is, it's got history. It's one of the few things that MLS doesn't have. It has a long history with wonderful stories that are interwoven throughout the fabric of this competition, even through the lean years, even through when MLS was just forming, even with the Rochester Raging Rhinos, winning as an A-League team and one of the last to do it. And you have all these things that you can't manufacture because you want to make a little extra coin. And I just thought it was a little disappointing that they took such a hard stance on what they were going to do. And maybe that's how they thought. And when I see some of the stuff that Garber is saying and Nelson Rodriguez, they are saying that we needed to get U.S. Soccer's attention. But to your point, some and MLS were in charge of marketing for U.S. Soccer, for the Open Cup for a long time. So it just feels like, wait. It just feels like a shell game a bit in terms of who wants to take on the responsibility. And U.S. Soccer does have to take some of it. But I don't know. They want to control the whole pipeline. And that's prior to the Open Cup decision. Once they got into the youth academy stuff and they took over the development academy from U.S. Soccer and made it their own, then you knew they wanted to control point A to point B, like every step of it. MLS Next Pro was next. We're going to create this third division, this U23 league, and now we're going to create Leagues Cup. We're going to control that as well. I try to be as fair as I can about this because they're trying to bundle all of these competitions together to create enough value to get a valuable and important TV contract, which is what they got from Apple TV. And it's a shame that they have to burn some bridges with existing competitions that are meaningful to a lot of people here, even though they say, I think there's a quote saying only a small amount of people care. I don't know. Maybe we're in an echo chamber on some social media platforms, but I think there are a lot of people that care. And now that it's taken away, I think people appreciate it even more. So in some ways, we're talking about the Open Cup more than we ever have, and hopefully that'll mean that it'll have a happy ending in some capacity. And I think it'll change, and hopefully we'll find that middle ground. But it's a shame that they decided to kind of say, hey, we have our own ball. We're going to take it and play over here. And so listen, I'll say it like this. This game is inclusive, right? It's for everybody. And MLS makes decisions that feel very exclusive. And I know why they set up the league the way that they did when it first got started, because they didn't want it to crumble and fail after 5 or 6 years. They needed it to last and sustain. What pisses me off, I guess, is the fact that there wasn't an exit plan from this strategy. We're like, okay, now we can we can give the clubs their autonomy and make decisions for themselves. And now we're like tethered to this previous mentality and mindset and business model that doesn't necessarily fit where the game needs to go to grow. And that then becomes inclusive instead of the exclusivity that they continue to crave. So that's it. I'm off my soapbox on that.
I guess my overall take has been for the past couple of weeks really is just the fact that they will throw that Garber and Rodriguez are throwing out every excuse except for the actual truth. And the fact that it's all about money and control. It's 100% of what it's about. And they start throwing out stuff like, oh, it's schedule congestion. We got Copa, we got Nations League, we got Leagues Cup, we got this, we got that. But then they keep adding in all these international friendlies.
Yeah, I saw that. I started laughing.
Stuff like
you can't cry schedule congestion and then add friendlies.
You have all this, but then the biggest talking point that we've always made on this front is that, okay, well, take your starting 11, set them aside. Don't even send them down to whichever USL team you're going to be playing, and play the other 15 players that don't ever get a minute. And I bring this up because this year is eight first teams of MLS and then 11 next pro teams. And of that 11 next pro teams, there's only 9 that are MLS based. 2 others that are some of the expansions. Chicago, happens to be one of those next pro teams. But it's funny because these are the players who were made available for Wednesday's Open Cup match, despite the fact that it's a next pro team. That's like the
some old dudes on that squad.
That's the 12 to 15 players on the first team that rarely get to play much.
My cousin Spencer Ritchie, Tom Barlow. These are old dudes. This is crazy.
Well, age regardless. My point is that they're basically doing what we said to do.
Right.
Play your bench. Play the players who don't play.
Right.
And,
right.
Rodriguez mentioned it in an interview recently. He did with The Athletic, where he talked about, hey, in Nations League, there's only 2 teams that go the full 7 games, and it's possible that neither of those teams are going to be MLS. It's possible that most of the MLS teams might flame out after the first 2 games in the group stage. Well, the same thing can be said about US Open Cup. How many of these MLS teams are going to flame out in the first or second stage? Chicago's had a horrible record in the last couple of US Open Cups, going out to the
and in general,
well, Michigan PDL team they lost to at one point.
Yeah, the Bucks. I would say really quick on that going into the round of 16 in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, there was 8 or 9 MLS teams, and now they're down to 3. So the schedule congestion, it just doesn't hold up. It's not going to really impact most of the teams in MLS's approach to Open Cup. So yeah, I'm glad that Chicago Fire is doing that, by the way, and just saying, yeah, you know what, we're just going to play whoever we want and get the minutes to the players that need it, right? And
but so, Brett's point was they could have done that anyhow.
They could have,
right? And still it would have been. They would have represented the Chicago Fire. And then Nelson going into this. Well, there are these weird ass leagues in the cups that allow the 2 teams to play. Last time I checked, not a single 2 team is allowed to play in any cup game, except if you're talking about Vietnam or some weird ass nation with a women's Beaker Cup in Dutch in Holland. They allow that. Anyhow, point being, kind of ridiculous examples to bring up on his part. But Jimmy, we want to thank you for coming on. You've been on here for 2 hours and 9 freaking minutes, and it's been a pleasure, as it always has been.
Always a pleasure.
Third time is always the best. They say you just get better over age. Each time is more exciting. And make sure everybody out there goes out and check out Jimmy on Golasso.
Don't. It's fine.
No. They should.
No, you should check me out on Golasso for sure. Golasso channel. and call it what you want. The podcast.
Yes, we say around here it's called call it what you want. We don't just say what you want. So make sure you check that out. Jimmy, we appreciate you coming back on. Let's not make it. Well, no, I mean, shit, it was what? You were on 13 years ago, then you were on 2 years ago, and now you're on now. So we're good. We're good. Let's not make it.
Let's circle back in 4 years. We'll talk about Gio Reyna some more.
Let's make it another 13. No, I mean,
still be sitting on the bench at 4.
I might not be around then. So let's do it sooner than 13 years.
Yeah, let's do it. Absolutely.
All right.
I appreciate you guys. Keep up the good work.
We love you. To all of you out there, good night.
That hurt.
Then what is this thing?
Gio should never play for U.S. men's national team again because of the action of his parents.
What an idiot! Oh, what type of Muppet does this?
Muppets. Absolute Muppets.
I'm not going to be the best person to give a whole explanation here, but that's